And just like that, I'm live with the great and very, very exceptional person, coach, head pro, superintendent. He's wore all the hats, Mr. James Leitz. James, thank you for carving out some time to come on the show.
Well, Pete, it's an honor to do this. It's an honor to talk to people who love this game like I do, and no matter what level, people who are just starting. I could talk golf. People see me at parties and they go, "Are you bothered if I talk about golf?" And I go, "No, not at all. I love talking about golf, as long as it's not about when I was a head pro about, I think we need to do this with the club or that with the club or plays too slow." That's the stuff I want to talk about. But when you talk about the game, I can't get enough.
Yeah, I had met you at Coach Camp last December. I can't remember the date. I think first week of December, Andrew and Terry's Coach Camp, and we were sitting at the same table. And I had talked to Andrew was on a couple weeks before as we did. I wanted to help him get the word out a little more that it was coming up, and hey, here's who's going to be on. And he was telling me about you, and I had not ever met you before. I'd taken some time away from coaching, really in the technological growth eras when I was out of it, when I was playing, and then I was out, and then I was hurt, and health issues and so on. But we sat at the same table for dinner, and you were the first one to speak up, and you said, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm James. What's your name? Where are you from?" And I was, from right here in Bluffton, right down the street from Andrew, and I live about 3 miles apart. But without knowing me and a person at your level to talk to somebody who doesn't have any level, it's like, wow, this guy, he's all about helping people, and he's not going to play I'm a top 100 or I've done this and I've done that. And it was, so what I'm getting at is anyone who has not heard of you, like I had not prior to Coach Camp, and have heard the stories about you being a phenomenal coach in person, they're spot on, and I can testify that. So that's one reason I've been looking very much forward to having you on.
Well, Pete, thank you. I've been very blessed, and it all starts with my parents. We pretty humble, 5 sisters. Matter of fact, my oldest sister, Karen, happy birthday, her 70th birthday today.
Wow.
And so we're getting into numbers that never thought we would ever see. And my parents always told us that we're all children of God, every one of us, and all should be treated that way. And so it's easy for me because I was trained at a young age. Plus, I had 5 sisters, so I had to learn how to make peace without physical violence. One boy, I was the only boy with 5 sisters. So I tell people I never saw the phone or the bathroom. And it was great. It's easy for me. And plus, being a head golf professional, you better have your head into other people's lives and what's important to them, or you will not last. And so the head professional world trained me to care about others, and then I truly care. It's not an act. I truly care. I tell people I cry at Walmart openings, and because things touch me. So I'm very blessed. I think that's why it's easy to do that. And literally yesterday, my parents. I was born in New Orleans. My parents. I lived in Kenner, Louisiana, until I was 14, and then just by accident found golf. And at the time, excuse me, we moved when I was 14. I picked up a club when I was 13. My daddy had a set of clubs in the back of an old 58 Chevy, and we had some property across Lake Pontchartrain that we were going to eventually move to, that we literally went out and cleared 1.5 acres with a shovel, an axe, and a rake. And we would go there on weekends and then go back home and then come back. My daddy was on vacation, and we'd go back every day, and we'd clear this lot. And I literally yesterday mowed the exact spot where I hit my first golf shot 50 years later. And it still brings emotion to me, that very spot, because I tell people I've been looking through a straw ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a very blessed person if you find your passion and you live in a great country like ours, that you could pursue that passion, make a living at it. It truly is a blessing. So, everything comes from that. my thanks every day just to have the opportunity to do what I do is very high. I'm very grateful for my employers. I'm grateful for my students. I'm grateful to have, again, to make a living. My fellow golf professionals are a huge inspiration to me. And so that's kind of, I tell young kids now, they come in all the time and they want me to kind of mentor them. And I say, it only takes two things to be successful in golf: passion and time. I said, because if you have both of those, you'll get whatever you want. And with me, it was more when I started out, going back to, I worked on golf courses for 7 years in high school and in college. I graduated from college. I went to McNeese State University, Division I. The team, the May before I started, was at Division I finals at Yale. They were very good. So they were one of the top 25, 30 teams in the country. And I brought them down a little notch when I started. Anyway, I thought I wanted to play professional golf. I had a course record at 17. I thought I could play, but it was the 70s. In the 1970s, we were putting leeches on each other. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. No one did. A few teachers, the Golf Digest teachers knew were good, but compared to what we know now, that was the dark ages. And so for people who figured some things out biomechanically, whether it's, the golfing machine with Homer Kelly, lots of people had great information that they pursued with obviously nothing to measure it with. And so I grew up in that era where it was, I called it folklore instruction. Everything was handed down like folklore. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean they weren't passionate people. Trust me, you go back to some of them really old books, those guys were equally as passionate as anybody today. They had nothing but observation to create what they thought and experienced. So I played college golf. My first college tournament, I played with Freddie Couples at the University of Texas's tournament in Austin. It didn't intimidate him that he was Freddie Couples because I didn't know who the hell he was. He was a freshman like I was. What intimidated me is he had Houston on his bag. Well, Houston at the time was the Alabama of college golf.
Yep.
And so we played, and, he beat me by 4 shots, but I didn't think there was anything, he did that I couldn't do at the time. He just did it more often. Well, 4 strokes around over 40-something years. It's a lot of
Heads
strokes.
up. Heads up a little. That's a lot of zeros and commas.
About halfway through, I played with Hal Sutton. I played with some of the biggest names at the time, either in the tournament or some within the same group. So I had 2 college roommates win finals of PGA Tour School. Finals. Tim Graham and Ty Armstrong. I don't know how many people have had that. That's from McNeese State University, not Oklahoma State, not Houston,
mm-hmm.
Not some of these big golf schools now. So college golf in itself is an amazing thing. It's come a long way. I had only played 2 multi-day stroke play tournaments the first day I played college golf.
Wow.
They had nothing to play for in Louisiana when I was a kid. The only thing that was worthwhile that I couldn't play was the state junior, and you couldn't play that unless you were a member of a private club. Well, I couldn't afford to belong to a muni, much less a private. So I never played the state junior. You had qualifiers for U.S. junior and stuff, but you had to be a member of a private club back then. So I never could play. But what really got me to where in college, in 1980, I had missed a tournament, and I was pissed. And I made
you missed 80. It. You missed it, meaning you didn't qualify for the.
I didn't qualify.
Okay.
And so I was pissed, and I thought I knew something about the golf swing because I was always the most golf swing guy of anybody I knew. So everybody thought I knew something. The head pro at the club in Lake Charles would come pick me up at my dorm and go watch me hit golf balls when I was 19 because I thought I knew something. I know nothing. I found my old notebook from college that had all my swing thoughts. I had swing thoughts. I had yardage books. Everybody else is going out getting drunk. I'm looking on my yardage book, and I'm doing everything. They beat my ass. I worked harder, practiced harder, knew more about the game. I could tell you who won every U.S. Open from 1950 until 1984 or 5. Can't anymore, but I could at one time. I could tell you what course they played. And these guys couldn't tell you who won last year, didn't give a damn. But they were just better than me. Well, at least, then I started doubting my toughness to a certain extent because I outworked these guys. But yet they were beating me. Not always, not all the time, but more than I would. And they didn't know nothing. And so that kind of bothered me. Even my coach, God bless him, Coach Bowles, 91 years old, kissed the ground he walked on just to give me the opportunity to play college golf. He was a football coach. And at the end of my freshman year, he sat me down and he says, James, I'm going to have to cut your scholarship back a little bit because, you just didn't perform like we had hoped. But I'm going to keep you on the team because you work harder than everybody else and you're a great example for everybody. And you showed some flashes. And so I was very grateful because I couldn't afford to go to college without some scholarship help. Mm-hmm. And anyway, he says, I'm not sure if you're as tough mentally as Tim and Larry. And man, I'm thinking to myself, I'm seething. I'm just so angry because I thought I could walk across hot coals compared to anybody I knew, that I would do anything to be good. But that was his take. I wasn't mentally as tough. Well, sure, it's hard to be mentally tough as when I tell people I was shooting free throws over the back of my head playing college, Division I college golf. In other words, my technique sucked and I didn't know it. I didn't know it. So 1980, my sophomore year, I missed a tournament. I was mad. I only had about $100 to my name for the whole rest of the semester, and I went and bought a $90 Pentax camera, a still camera. And the reason I bought it is because it had 1,000 shutter speed. Okay? One frame. They used to have it called a graph check back in the day. It was 8 pictures. And I only knew one person who had a graph check. For instance, they had them at different schools. Mike Holder had it at Oklahoma State and so forth.
So it didn't matter, not to interrupt, but it didn't, you had $100 and you spent $90 on a camera. So you were forsaking food for the rest of the semester because you were so hell-bent on you were going to beat these guys who you thought you should be beating.
I ate Spam. I ate Spam and no lie, I ate Spam, fried bologna, and bread and macaroni and cheese, which were 5 for $1 at Kroger, and 20 cents each. And I did that for months at a time. And I tell people how to chew through that wall if I thought it would make me better. So that was the unfortunate thing, is that the information I did get, being folklore and not good, again, my old college notebook had 9 pages in it of all my swing thoughts. There's not one quality swing thought in 9 pages for my college golf years. Not one. Not one today I could go, God, I wish I'd have stayed on that vein. Not one. So I guess God had a different plan for me. So I missed the tournament, and I had my girlfriend, then eventually wife, to take pictures of me. We had 12 pictures, 12 roll of film, 6 face on, 6 down the line. I said, look, try to take them when I'm here, and just snap it when you think I'm there. And it took a week to get them back. So you take the pictures, a week you get them back. I already missed the tournament and missed the next tournament's qualifier before I got the pictures back. So I lay all 12 out, and there's a picture of me. I didn't get any of them at impact, but there was one post-impact where my hands were about even with the ball, and the club was about 1.5 foot past the ball. There's only one problem, Pete. I didn't know it was wrong. So here it was right in front of me, why I could hit it over anything, why I couldn't play in the wind, why I could drive it as far as Hal Sutton. We were on the range one day hitting the ball at the end of the driving range at University of Texas's home course, driving it into the parking lot, seeing who could hit it the furthest, but I couldn't hit a 7-iron 150 yards. So what I did wrong with my driver didn't hurt me, but when I put the ball on the ground, golf was hard. And then I made it worse by putting the ball in the front of a divot. So I didn't know it was wrong. So I'm sitting there with the ball in the front of the divot, hitting balls like there's no tomorrow, dude. I'd look like a machine. People would come watch me hit balls. I didn't know I was bottoming out behind the ball. 300 balls a day. And I would hit it over a tree. Me and Tim were in the woods one time, and he had to hit it under, and I hit it over this loblolly pine tree that was about 80 feet high. He goes, how in the hell do you do that? And I'm thinking it's because I'm really good. It's because I sucked. But I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. So anyway, I still have that picture. That picture's on the wall in my studio, and it's a series of pictures, and it's the first one. Because that picture really eventually defined my whole career. So I didn't know it was wrong, finished my college career, 3 letters, but never won a tournament. I had a chance to win a tournament my senior year with 2 holes to go, and my coach told me I was leading. I'm not blaming him. I shit the bed. I mean, I was so nervous because I thought I was finally going to have the goal I wanted, and I finished double and lose by a shot.
Been there, not quite there, but been there where I realized I was in the lead at a very big tournament at the time and went bogey double.
Yeah, I mean, I 3-putted the last 2 holes. I mean, one was a par 5 for Christ's sakes. I doubled. So anyway, I'm getting to the end of my college career, and I go, you know what? I want to be in golf. I love working on the golf course. The pro shop was okay. I'd worked in pro shops, but I loved working on the golf course. That was my passion. So I get my degree, and by the way, I get married between my junior and senior year in college. I have a son, my son Ross, who's 41 years old, a month before I graduated college. So now here I was playing college golf, married with a child. Played pretty good that semester. Didn't have to worry about college golf. I had to worry about how my kid was going to eat. And so I knew when I got out, I wanted to be a superintendent. So I took a job as the assistant superintendent at Sherwood Forest in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As the assistant superintendent, and I'd worked for the guy a couple of summers before, and he knew I'd work my tail off. So my deal was I was assistant superintendent, $4.15 an hour, unlimited overtime. Unlimited overtime. So anyway, about a week later, I'm at a 6-foot hole, and the pro comes up to me and he says, hey, Pinewood opened up in Slidell, where I used to work for 7 years. He says, the head pro job opened up. They fired the pro who I worked for. And I'm thinking, you know what? I think I need to consider this because I know I can do the job. And here I am with a child, and I'm in the bottom of a 6-foot hole in the pro. Frank Gumpert goes, a lot of good that college degrees doing you. And, I kind of laughed. So anyway, I interviewed for the job. They knew me. They knew I worked hard. I had my degree in marketing, and I went there with a typewritten plan. In 1982, people didn't typewrite anything.
No.
You hear me? I went in there with a typewritten plan. So I was the first of that generation to even know how to type. And at the end of the interview, they gave me the job with 3 guys sitting in the hallway to be interviewed. I felt so bad. Because these guys were fixing to tell to go home, and they gave this 22-year-old, never been an assistant pro a day in his life, the job. So my first week as a head pro, I'm teaching an engineer, Mr. Ray Lacombe. And Mr. Ray, I asked him to do something at the top of his backswing, and like any engineer, he worked at Martin Marietta, who made the fuel tank for the shuttle in New Orleans. We had a bunch of engineers. I could talk to a metallurgist. I could talk to a physicist. I could talk to an aerodynamic engineer any day I wanted. How about that?
That's a pretty good lab to have.
Ooh. So Mr. Ray says, why do you want me to do this? I said, because I do it, which is the most stupid thing you can do. He goes, but how do you know if I do it right? And he says, James, never guess what you can measure. You've heard that a lot, haven't you? Well, I made that phrase famous, but it's not my phrase. It's Raymond J. Lacombe's phrase, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery. Unbelievable man. It changed my life. I went and bought a $2,800 video camera when my salary was $9,000 a year. So now I'm measuring.
There seems to be a little pattern here when you.
It gets worse. It gets way worse.
We'll get into that too.
So the first week I have the camera, who am I going to video first? Me. Well, it's a terrible camera. It sucked, and I'm still flipping it, but I don't know. It's blurry. The club's blurry a little bit. It was a Reggie Vision Panasonic. I still got the picture. I still have it. Anyway, the club's flipped past my hands. This is 2 years after the picture I took. It's flipped. I still don't know what's wrong. I'm a head pro, giving lessons, charging people, and I don't know that's wrong. So fast forward to 1986. Oh, no, before that, excuse me. I had that thing about a month, and my buddy Tim Graham, by the way, I caddied for him when he won the finals at Tour School, one of the highlights of my career, even now. So, I mean, Chip Beck came through that, Hal Sutton, Larry Mize. I mean, it was an unbelievable group of people that got through that Tour School, and he won. So anyway, he was on the tour, and I helped him. I was one of his teachers, which was a joke. I knew nothing. I thought I did. So he missed a cut in Memphis, and I said, man, drive down to Slidell. I said, I got a camera because I'm thinking what Mr. Ray said. So I'm gonna measure. He had trouble hooking the ball. I'm gonna measure the hook, and I'm gonna measure the one that doesn't hook as much, and I'm gonna reconcile the difference. Because I said, Mr. Ray, why do you want to measure? He says, James, if you measure a good outcome and you measure a poor outcome, you could reconcile why they're different. That's what hit me like a ton of bricks. So I said, well, I'll get Tim in, and I'll see a good shot and a bad shot, and I'll tell him the difference. So he gets in there, and I hook it up. There's only 2 wires to hook up. It took me about 20 minutes. Drawing lines on the screen with a marks a lot. Had to take acetone to get it off. They didn't have dry erase markers then. So anyway, I'm measuring. After about a half hour, because we had audio on it, I realized I didn't know what the hell to look for. I'm thinking I'm trying my ass off. And then I realized that the pulls and the pushes and whatever it was, you couldn't see on video. What a valuable lesson. My first month as a pro. What you see on video is great, but there are only 4 laws in golf, and you can't see any of them on video. You can't measure them accurately with video. Everything else is optional. And so, as I tell people, I'm writing a book. I've been writing it for 20 years. I don't know if I'll ever finish it. It's called Golf's 4 10,000ths of a second. My journey to golf's 4 10,000ths of a second, which is how long the club and the ball are together. Because eventually everything funneled through that. Until I got to that point, I was just folklore. So anyway, Tim left, lost his card. I couldn't help him. I felt terrible. And then I realized when even I was teaching bad golfers, I couldn't help them either. I thought I was helping good players. I wasn't helping them at all. I was a cheerleader looking back at it. I didn't give them good information. The bad golfers, I didn't know enough to fix them. So I shied away from teaching. I taught a little bit. I bet you only gave 10 lessons with that $28 video camera. I said, I got to go learn how to do this. I don't like people taking people's money and not making them better. So there was a guy in my city that was teaching for a living. I'm going to watch him. He teaches for a living. Well, hell, he was worse than I was. And I'm going, holy crap, what do I do? This is 1982. There was no internet. These young kids go, well, just get on the internet and start watching YouTube. Well, it wasn't that way. So the only thing you had at all was TV on Saturday and Sunday and Golf Digest. That's it. Which I read Golf Digest through and through, including the classifieds, wanting to learn something. Read it twice, 3 times. So anyway, I realized I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I went to business school 1 that first year.
Yeah, at least then you had you did not have the ego getting in the way to realize that you didn't know it, which was set you on a obviously you are where you are today.
I still don't know.
Yes, but you admit it. A lot of people wouldn't admit it. They would have said, I know this, and they would have kept getting people worse.
Look, I'm going to go there. So anyway, I go to business school. and I have to read all their stuff. Dallas, Texas, 250. Remember, I'm a head pro. 250 assistants, apprentices in the room, and the guys on the teaching part. And God gave me a spatial mind. I made a 19 on my ACT test. I never took physics, so I'm no brainiac, but I spoke at MIT 3 times. So anyway, I do have, for some reason, spatial common sense. Blessed with that. So we're in class, and we're going through the ball flight laws or the impact laws, whatever you want to call them. And he said the ball starts along the path and then curves towards the face. Well, Golf My Way, what Jack Nicklaus said, he said I would aim the ball, if the pin was behind a tree, I'd aim the club face at the tree and swing to the right of the tree, and the ball would come back. Well, when I did that, I kept hooking it into the tree or slicing it into the tree, and I realized it didn't seem to work for me. Well, the reason it didn't work for me is because it doesn't work. It didn't work for Jack Nicklaus. It's what he thought he was doing. So he didn't even do what he thought he was doing. So I'm in this class, and the guy says the ball starts on the path and curves back towards the face. 1982, maybe early 83. And I said, I asked him, I put my hand up. He says, yes. And everybody's looking at me. And I go, well, the path of the club going right and left, I understand that. But isn't the path of the club going down when you hit an iron? He goes, well, sure. I said, well, if the ball starts on the path, why don't the ball go underground and come up? And he looks at me and he goes, he says, I hate to tell you this, I never thought about it that way. But I think you're right. It can't start on the path. But don't answer it on the test that way. It's a true story. So certain things just made sense to me. And so I go back, 4 years go by, and I get a good video camera, a Sony camera that was $3,300, and I was maybe doing $1,000 a year teaching, charging $25 an hour.
It's a good thing you didn't become a money manager.
Yeah, but the thing was, I was a head pro. Let's go to the other side. I was a head pro. My salary was $9,000. I owned the pro shop, and I got 20% of the carts and green fees. And by the way, in the 30 years that I got the cart and green fees there, or 27 years, I grew that business 9-fold. Then they took it away. So
you were good at making it, but not good at spending.
No. But look, I took care of my family.
I'm just giving you a hard time about spending.
Yeah, I worked 80 hours a week, every week. Not some of the time, not 7 months. 12. It rained, I stayed at work all day. That's how I learned my craft. So anyway, I get a good video camera. Who's the first person I videoed? Me. Thrown away, still don't know what's wrong. 6 years after the first picture. So I said, well, I'm going to take my camera. I'm going to go to the tour event in New Orleans. 1986, there weren't no video cameras on tour in 1986. Different people had them, but you just didn't see them out there. Practice round, I go out and video. First guy I video, it's a club pro, never heard of him. Shaft behind the left arm. I go, look at the way this guy does it. Well, I never heard of him. So I go, Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins. I went, son of a bitch. I know I don't do that. 13 years after the first day I played golf, I threw it away and didn't know it. Because when I was a senior in high school, the pro there, who I just endeared, I lost the tournament hooking it out of bounds on the last hole, left. And he says, you want to never do that again? And I was in tears. He says, I said, yes. So listen what he did. He gave me a zero knuckle grip with a long thumb in the left hand. And my thumb stuck out of my grip like Andy Bean. And that's what I played college golf with. Well, when you got that grip, you got to flip it to square it up.
Right.
And you got to flip it, and then you got to hit it over the moon. But I did it 300 times a day, and many rounds I hit 18 greens in my career, probably 5 or 6 times back then. So anyway, I'm excited and mad at the same time. I'm mad because I played 13 years not knowing of this huge flaw in my golf swing. Now to explain why I hit it over trees. Now to explain why I hit fat and thin shots with irons. So I'm excited because now I'm going to fix it. So I get to work the next day. It's still dark. It's so damn early. I set my video camera. I'm waiting for that sun to come on. I can't wait. First swing. Flipped. I'm just going to do it more. Flipped. Well, I'm just going to start with my hands there. Flipped. After about 15 videos, I'm pissed. Because I can't fix it by just knowing what to do. What a great thing to learn. What do our students do all day? I got it. Just give me the information. I'll do it. Okay, jump over an 8-foot bar. Come on, dude. Don't cheapen my game. Change is what's hard. Not even doing what you ask them to do. Jumping over an 8-foot bar is hard. Changing things is hard. What to change? I had to learn what to change. So anyway, I got to go into pro shop. I'm throwing keys at people. I'm cursing under my breath. I'm so mad I can't see straight. So I tell people, if the golf swing, the game of golf is a 1,000-piece puzzle, I think I might have close to 900 pieces, but I don't have all 1,000. And I don't think anybody does. Somebody who you don't think can teach a lick has got one of the 1,000 I need. One of the 100 I need. Okay? So all of us, nobody has all of the answers. I was a club repairman. My club pro threw golf clubs. He broke his wedge, never made it 18 holes. So I started doing club repair when I was 15 years old. So at that age, I thought everything was the club. I changed the club. I took an old wooden Tommy Armour driver and I said, why is the face curved? This is stupid. I took the face, put it in a vise, and flattened that son of a gun out, put new grooves in it, and that driver went everywhere, and I ruined what then was a $300 driver. See, so you learn things. There's a piece of my puzzle that I had to learn the hard way. You learn through pain. The young kids go on video, online, and they learn all the right answers, but they don't know why they're the right answers. Where I was blessed is I screwed it up every way to Sunday. So when I give you an answer, I'm saying I'm right all the time, because I'm not. But at least I know why I gave the answer. That is huge. You can't put a dollar figure on that. Mm-mm. Because if you know why you're there, you'll never go anywhere else. If you don't know why you're there, as soon as what you're told works, don't work, now you're going on. Now you're moving along.
That's interesting that you say that you have all that experience on, and you understand the reason why. But it wasn't long ago I was reading an article or video, whatever it was that I was watching about. There were two major corporations, and I'm not even going to try to remember who they were. But this is going back to somewhere in the 80s, I believe, or 90s, and they were joining forces. And now it's a mega corporation. But they were trying to come up with their logo. And they hired this lady who was world renowned at that time for developing logos for many different things. And at the meeting of all the brass from both companies with her and her team, they were describing what they were going to do, what they wanted to do, and all these other things, what they stood for, and all the things that a logo should encompass. And while they're sitting there, she's drawing on a napkin. And it turned out that ended up being the logo. And by the time the meeting was over, she goes, "Here's your new logo." And they said, they loved it, of course. And then they said, "But wait a minute, we paid you all this money and you wrote that logo, you came with that logo in just a couple hours." She said, "I came up with that logo in a couple hours in 30 years. She had 30 years of experience behind that.
Absolutely. But I tell people I was born 40 years too early. But then again, I'm very blessed that I was born when I was born in the age of no technology, in the age of bad information for the most part. Look, I promise you back then, Davis Love and all those guys could teach, could help people and make better. The problem is they weren't around me. And I was a head pro. I couldn't get in the car and go watch people teach. I bet you I haven't watched till this very day 15 hours of other people teaching in my life. 20 maybe. Never organized. I've watched Mike Adams and people like that are wonderful teachers. Teach, a little here, a little there. And, so I had to learn it in Slidell, Louisiana, basically on my own. But I had two goals when I started down this journey. One, I said I want to have the best information in the world that I could find. And two, I just want to be the best I could be. I didn't even know the top 100 list existed until I was in the business 30 years. So it was never a goal.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for Mike Adams in the beginning, once he found me and understood what I was doing, he was a huge part of that. And so it was about information. So I was a measurer. I bought everything you could imagine along the way. And I measured with it. Some things I learned, some things I didn't. By the way, I had two pads in 1993 that you could put your feet on that measured weight transfer. The problem was they were this high off the ground and people would fall off of them. I was worried about somebody getting hurt. So here I am with this video camera, and I realized, oh my God, this is a huge thing. So I'm flipping it, and I couldn't figure out how to get rid of the flip myself. Couldn't figure it out. Started with my hands forward. I'd do anything but sell my soul to the devil to figure it out. And in 1987, the year after I got that other video camera, there was a guy who was in North Mississippi. He had one arm, it was his left arm, right arm was right here, born deformed. One leg, which was his left leg, had a club foot. His right leg was a prosthetic. And in the one hand he only had 4 fingers. And he had a 5 handicap. I said, I got to video this guy. So I found out where he lived, called the pro. He said, yeah, he plays every Saturday morning. Is it okay if I video him? Yeah, he won't mind. So I drive 3 hours, and I video this one-armed guy. And lo and behold, at impact, dude, the club shaft's behind his beautifully straight left arm. Ball turf. And you know why he was a 5? He was a crappy putter. That was a little podunk golf course. The guy was a 5 handicap. So I'm watching this, and I'm going like, his club looks like the tour players at impact. And I said, and he hits good shots, compresses it, low little draw. And then I realized at that moment, again, putting parts of this puzzle decades apart. Some of these pieces I figured out decades apart. We all find our little puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was decades apart. And I'm like, oh my God. What the club does trumps what the body does. If the club does the right thing at impact, nothing else matters. But everything before it does matter, because that's how the club gets there. That makes sense.
Yeah, very much.
So the closer you get the impact, to me, after transition is when point of no return. Once that club gets speed in it, you're no longer swinging it, it's swinging you. You have very little influence on that club. Some, because I've got gears and I've had 3D for 17 years, by the way, AMM and then gears. I don't have every answer, but I've tried everything under the sun. It's pretty cool. So anyway, I knew that even myself, I was the guy who had cancer, who now had to go cure people with cancer. And you see all the stuff on the internet about handle dragging. You know how many handle draggers I see per person throwing the club away? 15-1. Throwaway people. I have a house because of throwaway and slicing. It's paid for. It's been paid for 25 years. Yes, they're handle draggers, some, but I wouldn't call it an epidemic. Not among hackers.
No, I don't think they can move their body well enough to handle drag.
You get to my next point. So 1993, I go down there to with Fred Griffin and Ralph Mann at Grand Cypress.
Mm-hmm.
1993, they just opened that place where they had a camera.
Had all the cameras. Yep.
Yeah, camera down the line, and they were all 3 feet off the ground. Oh, this is cool. Why do you put it there? Well, because you get the least amount of distortion. Another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy. So anyway, we're in there, and what they would do is they'd measure your body, and then they'd take a stick figure from the tour players they had done it with, and basically come up with a model of what the body did. Tilts and turns. Arm swing, shaft the left arm. Well, I was grossly underturned. I was told to be square at impact. In the 70s, you were told at impact, you want to look like you did a dress. Well, I hit 300 balls a day doing that. With a long thumb, weak grip, there's your problem. So shoot, I just said, I'll just go rotate. No. I have the next sign on my wall says, your ingrained motor pattern is stronger than your new information and conscious intention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say it again. Your ingrained motor pattern is stronger than your new information and conscious intention. That summarizes what we have to do in teaching. We have to change a motor pattern that's so ingrained. And everybody wants to do it immediately with new information. They want to do it full speed and have it work. They're sniffing glue. They're frickin' sniffing glue. Now, it's one of these things. There's certain things you could change. Tell a tour player a few things, and he's only got one thing to change. So that brings me to the next thing. So now I go back, and I've got way better information, and I read a book my buddy Rob Noel gave me years ago from George Newsom, all about getting to the finish in balance and so forth. And I read that book, and I realized that I was underturning, and other people were too. So this book really helped me, along with my face the path and impact point stuff that I'd already morphed into. I went, wow, if they move to the finish and we teach them somehow to change the path, the face, and the impact point and the low point, I can make these people better. You know, in 1988 is when I felt like was the point that I should be charging for what I was doing. Because I was making people better and I was helping poor golfers.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had to learn that golf is mean. There's only one thing in the world meaner than golf. I'm going to tell you what it is. So it's mean. And number two, golf's terrible at partial credit. Means you could do a lot of stuff right and not get paid.
Mm-hmm.
Like typing. If there's 26 letters in the alphabet and I only know 23, I can't type a manuscript. Welcome to golf. If you're doing certain things that are creating bad impacts and you don't fix them, you could practice all you want. You could go to all the sports psychologists you want. That does help, by the way. Mental affects physical. We don't have enough time to get into that, but it does. So anyway, I realized that when I was giving people a tip, guy had a bad grip like mine and he sliced it, or I would start back then, I would try to get slicers to fix their path first, which was wrong. Okay? And I realized I had to go get the reason why the face was open first, which is usually grip or lack of understanding what the club was supposed to do. And then work on the path. Because then if you start hooking the ball, you'll gladly swing to the right. So, again, pieces of the puzzle, decades apart. So in 1989, there was a program called Lotus 123, which is basically Excel today.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a computer in 1988. So I literally have every loft and line of every club I've bent since 1988. I keep loft and line and fitting stuff. That's how kind of my fitting software started. I started keeping track when I would fit people. They get this printout and go, wow, you did this for me? Yeah. That really did it for me because I can't remember tomorrow what I told you today. So I started putting even my lessons on this, my notes. And then I realized that golf's like a 10-step math problem. If you got 5 steps wrong, you got the wrong answer. What do you have if you fixed one of the wrong steps? Wrong answer. What do you got when you got 2 wrong steps? Fix 2. Wrong answer. 3. Welcome to golf. But what does the golfer expect? You give them 1 tip, and they want to knock the paint off the flag. What a delusional place to be. Well, the instructor has to tell them about the process. So when I say, you still got the wrong answer, and then they go, I said, so you cannot expect when I give you your first tip, which is the grip is wrong, that you're going to even get incrementally better. So as we fix these steps, we're not even guaranteed that we're going to get to be an 89 shooter, 88, 87, 86. Sometimes in math, when you fix one of the wrong steps, you're further away from the right answer than when you started. And you've got the awkwardness of introducing a motor skill change, which puts people in mental and physical awkwardness. You know how to drive a standard car? With a clutch. Okay? You got a couple gray hairs. You're old enough.
Yeah, I've learned
that's
on
all they had when I was a kid. In my neighborhood, trust me, nobody owned an automatic. Well, there's a physically confusing thing to do. Left foot does one thing, right foot does one thing, right hand does one thing, left hand does another thing, all at the same time. Nobody does it right. So it's a motor skill of which many things have to be fixed.
And then they all have to work in the correct sequence. Because how many times have you floored the gas pedal and the clutch didn't let out enough, and then you pop it too much, and then the car just jolts and snaps everybody's neck?
So this is probably the best thing I can ever tell anybody as a teacher. And a lot of people steal this, and I don't mind it, because you know why? There are plenty of bad golfers. And so it's every single lesson I give, I have a spreadsheet for that golfer for 30 years. My notes. And at first, on the left side, it's what they call conscious incompetence, thinking about it and not doing it right.
Four stages of learning.
Right. And I never read that book, by the way. Somebody told me that, and I liked it, and I stuck with it. And then eventually you got to get unconscious incompetent. So I said, well, how do I do this in a visual form for my students to understand? So I literally started doing a spreadsheet with all the things we talked about in the lesson over here, and unconscious competence. And over here is unconscious competence. But to get those from here to here, all 5 of them or 10 or however many you have, they've got to go through a dark period. And I call that the dark tunnel. So here's the bright light, which is unconscious competence, and here's the beginning of the dark tunnel. So they got to go through the dark tunnel, which is curved, because if it was a straight tunnel with a bright light in it, it wouldn't be dark. And this is what it says. The first part of the dark tunnel says understanding. You have to know why I'm asking you to do what you're doing. Like Mr. Red. If you know why, this wall is 90 degrees. You know why it's 90 degrees? Not because it looks the best, because it holds the most weight.
Load. That disperses load.
88-degree wall. So I get people to understand the laws, and that if you don't conform to them, they will kick your butt till hell freezes over. And you don't even have to know what they are unless you break them. My next thing on the wall, my favorite slide in my presentations. Great players pay homage to laws they have no idea exist. That's an old one for me. They don't know why they're good. They know now more why they're good than they did even 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Eons better. Some of them know too much for their own good. Some of them ruin their careers by learning to find out what was right. I look at it like this. Remember Carlos Franco?
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Franco was in Japan when my buddy Brian Watts was there, and Brian brought us over there, me and Rob Noel, and he said, you got to go watch this guy. He's going to be a star. He says, you better hurry. He only hits about 10 balls. So I brought my video camera over there. I'm videoing Carlos Franco. He's going to be a next star. Well, sure as hell, he comes over here and had a pretty good little run.
Mm-hmm.
He don't practice, didn't have a coach, blah, blah, blah. We won a handful of tournaments in the States, maybe a few less, but did real well. But then went into a slump. You know why he never got out of it? He didn't know how he got to the mountain in the first place. So the guys, Freddie Couples been on the mountain for 40-something years. But you know what? Bubba Watson was on the top of the mountain. They didn't know how they got there either. But guess what? If you don't break the laws eventually, you still don't need to know them. So that's why I can say, well, this guy didn't know that. This guy, they're going to credit all kinds of things for their success. I work hard. Well, hell, I worked all of them. That didn't mean crap. Some things the good Lord gives you. Putting a club on the ball in the size of a quarter over and over, he don't give to everybody. I can move impact point on the face for players, but if you think I got the secret for putting it in the size of a quarter, nobody's got that secret. And if you have it, let me know, because I'm coming over. Okay? Some things the good Lord gives you. Somebody says, well, just practice a lot. That's BS.
So you can't even practice the wrong thing over and over. That's just going to build the wrong pattern.
You can shoot free throws over your head till your freaking hands bleed. You're only going to get so good.
Mm-hmm.
So I created this spreadsheet that has understanding in the dark tunnel. The second is exaggeration. You have to exaggerate what I ask you to do. Third is block practice. In 1974, my sister told me, you need to take typing because everybody's not going to have their secretary. I knew I was going to be in business. So she said, you need to learn how to type. So I went and signed up for typing class. There were 32 people in the class. And my dad says, why in the hell did you sign up for typing? I said, Dad, there's 30 girls. and so I learned how to type. My teacher was genius. She put cardboard over the typewriter, so if you looked at the keys, you could only see cardboard. So I never created the habit of looking at the keys. So
that was the best.
Numbers, huh?
That was a one time I listened to my mother, and of course it worked out like it should have. She told me in high school. Now I graduated high school in '90, a little younger than you, but she told me, she says, you're going to need this in college, so take it. And I took typing and keyboarding same semester. And to this day, it's one of the best, looking back, it's one of the best classes I ever took.
It's the lady today. So anyway, she did it. This is what she did. She covered it, and we learned one letter at a time. A, B, 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 B. Well, that's block practice.
Mm-hmm.
She only wanted us to think of one thing at a time. And then eventually it was CAT. Oh, wow, we spelled the word. So I believe golf needs to be, when you're changing someone's skill, there's a lot of block practice to it. But eventually it needs to become variable. Okay? But block practice is skill acquisition. So these things, when I sit them on this list, I said, you're going to do it 5 times, not thinking of anything else on that list. I know you're smart enough to remember all 5. I only want you to concentrate on one. So the next thing after block practice, when you add a ball, there's poor results and awkwardness. What do you think people do when they get to awkwardness and poor results? They run out of the dark tunnel.
Yep.
They'll never see the bright light. The next is the next is verification. You have to verify that you're doing what you think you're doing. No, I teach my players to verify what they're doing. Because the more they verify away from me, the better they come back to me. But if they're not verifying, thinking they're doing what they think they're doing, what they should be doing, they're just burning calories. Then you'll find the bright light. I can't tell you anything I think that's more valuable than that, other than going through the 4 laws, which are speed, path, face, and impact point. Those are the only 4 things that tell a ball what to do. Everything else is optional. So I've got the next picture on the wall. You've seen it. Kuchar, Tiger, Fury. And I say, what do they have in common? And my answer, this is in my seminars, I go, beautiful women and jets.
Commas and zeros.
Exactly. And tons of majors. The answer is they all have enough speed to play golf at the level they're competing. They have the geometry that creates the shot they want to hit. which means they have path-to-face relationships that are correct to produce what they want. They have the ability to repeat it. And their golf swing doesn't cause injury. That's what they have in common. Plus a bunch of other things. They got great minds, competitive spirit, but just mechanically. So if you start going through that lens with people, then what I do when I start a lesson, they hit half a dozen 7-irons, half a dozen drivers after they're warmed up. And I get them with all my technology, TrackMan, force plates, gears if I'm using it. I don't say anything. And they hit both. I had to learn this years apart. I'd start a lesson and hit 7-irons, and then I'd see what they're doing, and I'd start the lesson. And at the end, I get a little cocky, and I go, hit me a driver. I go, oh, my God, look what this guy does with the driver. I didn't see that coming. So now I start every lesson with them doing what they do, even guys I've taught 100 times. They're going to hit both. I'm going to video, get my, because I'm going back to Mr. Ray. Measure good occurrence versus a poor occurrence, and you reconcile whether they're different. So I start every lesson that way, every fitting that way. So I know what they do, and I save those initial swings, save the technology and the readings, and then as it progresses through the lessons, then I start comparing whatever technology I'm using. That's the fun. Now, do they see everything? I have a AAA, abdominal aortic aneurysm. I have a stent in me this big around and that long that goes into a Y into my femoral arteries. If it breaks, I don't live to see the floor. They found it by accident. So when I got that surgery, the surgeon who's renowned for doing this gave me 2 sentences. That's it. You're going to come in on Monday? I even got it done on Monday, so I didn't miss work. Which I couldn't go for 4 days. I was in intensive care. So I missed the least amount of work. And he says, I'm going to cut you open, blah, 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 blah. You're going to miss 4 days of work. Maybe more. Maybe a week. I was back to work in 4 days. Here's a guy going to fix and cut my aorta in half. And he gave me 2 sentences. And so we have to be careful with technology not to confuse the student. Mm-hmm. Technology's great. Some people eat it up. That's the reason they come back. But other people are confused by it. Other people are addicted to it. Other people want to know it but shouldn't. So it's the instructor to decide what that golfer is. If you give people too much information, now they're driving a standard. You can take a tour player who's been driving a standard his whole life and start telling him what he's doing, and now he can't drive. So we got to be careful what we do and what we tell people. And to me, that's the real talent in an instructor is to be minimally invasive. You got to basically trick people into doing things.
Yeah, that was one of the that was one of the best lessons that one of my favorite lessons was that there was a member at one of the clubs I worked at, and when I went into teaching, left the club and was teaching, and he said, or he called me up one day and said, I want to take a lesson from him. Now, he was a New York State attorney and had progressed to a level. He was the assistant to the director of something, but his job was to read cases and write reports on those. So he was a speed reader. He could sit there and just look down a page and he'd read it. So obviously the guy could read unbelievably well. And he came to me swinging really well. And I said, what's the problem? He said, I've got way too much stuff in my head. I need you to help me clear it out. He basically wanted me to simplify it. He had read every book he could get his hands on, from Golf Machine, Search for Perfect Swing. He started there. And then he just read every instructional manual, Dr. Gary Wyron, Ledbetter, you name it, Jim Flick, Nicholas Myway, the whole litany of everything he could get his hands on. And this was about 10 years ago. And his brain was just so clogged. And so he was about a 4 or 5 handicap. And I always say, for me, those guys are it's usually something relatively simple to fix on them. Now, they might take some time, as you stated, through that progression of change, but it was very simple for me to get him to do what I wanted. And then for him the hard part was getting him to shut his brain off. But as soon as he started seeing the shots that he wanted to, that just snowballed.
Well, I think that's wonderful. The way I handle that is I tell them when I see that and know that, I'll say, I want you to think that everything you know about golf is correct, other than what I tell you. I said, only think of what I'm telling you. Everything else, forget about it. Totally forget about it. Because what I'm telling you is scratching the right itch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So I have 150 books. You can't see it in here. Guess how many I've read?
You've either read a few of them or all of them.
Maybe 4 or 5. I want to know what's in every one of them. I mean, I do, but I don't have time. And then after I got 3D 17 years ago, and I realized there's not nothing I can learn, but it's like almost like it made it more difficult to get something out of a book that wasn't done through some kind of measurement. Now, it's really cool. So I was in measuring for 20 years before golf became the measuring. I wasn't the only person. I'm not going to say I was. Mike Adams had force plates in the 80s, I think. So everybody had seen some form of 3D. First time I saw 3D, obviously, was that thing at Grand Cypress. And then in 1994, I went to see Hank Johnson, who came visited me for a day, watched me speak in the 94 Coaching and Teaching Summit, the big one.
Mm-hmm.
And I put a slide up there, by the way, from In Search for the Perfect Swing that validated what I said. It had the club path and the face and the ball starting closer to the face than the club path. I put that up on the wall. There was almost fist fights in the room. This is in 1994. Now, so I took that right out of the book. And then eventually the PGA, and look, God bless Gary Wyron, he figured out a lot. And that was the only thing he was not 100% correct on. But let me tell you something. I can't stand people throwing people under the bus who learned in a different era. The people who throw Homer Kelly under the bus or anybody else. Because you know what? They only had what they had. And a lot of them figured out a lot of stuff with nothing.
Yeah, I agree. John Sinclair, the first coach camp I went to a couple years before COVID, the year before COVID, John was the speaker. I think he spoke second after Doc Brett McCabe. And John and I went to lunch later that day, and I said that was probably the best opening I've ever heard, and because it was needed. And he basically said that earlier that morning he was reading the paper, watching the news about the scientific industry, where somebody had come up with something that was so far beyond what anyone had thought that discipline could go to. And the congratulations to that individual throughout the industry was immense. And they said, look, we'll do our peer-reviewed studies and we'll critique and we'll see if we can poke holes in it later. But for now, you've done a phenomenal job. He said, if anybody in the golf industry did something of the same, over half of the industry or the coaching industry would start tearing it down for a number of different reasons right from the beginning. He said, that's got to stop.
Well, it's not going to stop because not all of us are equipped the same as human beings. Being a head pro for 40 years and never being fired, that's a hard job. And I loved it. I did it as well as I could. You got to be a peacemaker. You have to be a peacemaker. And you have to work relentlessly hard to gain people's trust. And so what happens is you've got, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. There was a crazy guy on my street. Crazy. When for Halloween, they had the girls raise their little dresses to give him candy. Never touched him, but he was crazy. My best friend lived 2 streets over. He had a crazy guy on his street. Did something else. Well, guess what? There was probably a crazy person on every block. They just didn't know each other, and they couldn't connect. That's called the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now all the crazy peoples have a voice, and now everybody has to listen to them. See, within that house, the crazy guy, only his family tuned him out years ago, and only a few people knew he was crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So the internet has now interlaced everybody together.
It's giving everyone a voice, and some people back then you needed to earn your voice. You had to prove that you were at least somewhat competent to have a seat at the table.
You had to do it organically.
Yes.
Okay. And so I was asked to speak in 1988 for the first time. Jimmy Hedrick asked me he says, James, you know more about shafts than anybody, because I was a club repair guy, club fitter. And he was right. I was the tallest midget in midget bill. I knew more than any of them. But I said, I'll do it. And I was scared to death. I was 28. And so I had about 6 weeks to prepare. And I only knew of 2 shaft companies in the world, Aldilla and True Temper. So I had to find out. I knew True Temper was in Memphis, Tennessee. And I didn't know where Aldilla was. And I figured out they were in California. So I called the old Yellow Pages and looked at the area code. Hey, can you give me the number of True Temper golf shafts? And I called him up. Can you tell me who your technical guy is? Well, his name's Bob Bush. Can I speak to Mr. Bush? No, but I can have him call you back. Okay, have him call you. So in those 6 weeks, I learned 5 times more about golf shafts than I knew the day the guy asked me.
Mm-hmm.
I did my speech. I tried to write down every word. And after one sentence, I couldn't look at my notes anymore. And I realized that I had looked at this stuff so hard that I didn't need notes. And learned very valuable lessons. Here's pieces of the puzzle, by the way. I learned that the opportunity to present, and it is an opportunity, also carries responsibility of learning, and it carries the responsibility of living about what you're talking about. Because if you don't live it, you're just a talking head. So a lot of people talk about technology and they've never owned it. They've never used it, but they have an opinion. God bless them. That's okay. I mean, we all can have an opinion. And I put 6 times in my career, I spent more in one purchase than I made a year in teaching. 6 times. Not 6 of my worst years. I'm talking about at the time I did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I bought 3D in 2006, it was $30,000 and I was doing about $18,000 a year in teaching. We went out to Titleist, me and 5 other golf pros, all golf machine guys, and Greg Phillips and Dave Phillips and Greg Rose, and the 5 of us were in a conference room. It was one of the coolest days of my career at the time because, here we're at TPI. They closed it down just for us, and we were going to talk golf swing for 2 days. And they had 3D, the wired AMM system. You familiar with that?
Is that the one that
and it comes down to the Rich Sinclair has it, and so forth and so on. So this is 2006.
Is that the one Dr. Neal uses? Rob Neal?
Yes. Version of it. He uses an 8 sensor. I had a 12 sensor. 12 sensor gets the legs. His doesn't do the legs. So anyway, we're sitting in this room and we're talking about all kinds of theory. And Greg Rose goes, is deceleration good in the downswing? Raising my hand. No. He goes, you're wrong. And all the young guys today goes, you didn't know that, Leitz? No one in the game knew that. No one in the game was telling people to decelerate. So I said, show me. So he showed me a graph. Pelvis slowing down, rib cage, lead arm. Then he showed us wrist graphs. By the way, the AMM wrist graphs are the best ones. And he's showing us the lead wrist going in towards extension at impact. It wasn't in extension, it was moving towards extension. 700 degrees per second for tour players. Going, holy Christ, that's faster than anybody's hips turn.
Mm-hmm.
So is the 5th power accumulator in golf machine terms. So, but we were sitting there looking at frames, frame. Well, yeah, the wrist didn't look like this at impact. But it was moving for good players. It looked like this, or even some of them looked this. But it was moving towards that. 2006. I said, how much of one of those? It was $30,000. I bought one. You know why I bought one? Because I realized I didn't know what the hell I was talking about again. So I got that thing. The first day I had it, I was up till 2 a.m. playing with it. I couldn't go to sleep. and was a golf machine guy. So now I'm looking at these wrist graphs, and it's not what they're showing. You know, we talked about flat left wrist in the golf swing. I still think I tell people flat left wrist sometimes, knowing that really wasn't even possible. So anyway, I start measuring. That was 2006. 2007, I got TrackMan. So in 2007, I was measuring 3D and TrackMan at the same time. So I created a matrix of how the body moved, going back to the one-arm golfer. By the way, I didn't finish that story. Two things. An impact. His shoulders were level. His hips were square. But his shaft was leaning. I go, son of a gun. I know I got to be open. And then I realized he didn't have to be open. His right hand didn't have to be on the club when it was leaning. Now, I learned that in 1988, by the way. 86, whatever, 86, 88. So you see what I'm talking about? So anyway, I realized that everybody was underturned on the downswing, overturned on the backswing. Nobody had the right wrist movements. Amateurs, but very few. And anyway, I'll never forget, I call up Brian Menzel, is a friend of mine, and I called Brian up. I said, Brian, you know, flat left wrist is not possible, because he's the one who really reintroduced me to the golfing machine. I had read the book in 1980, middle 80s, threw it against the wall because I had nobody explain it to me. I wasn't smart enough. You know, the guy who read all that stuff, I'm not him. I can't do it.
Well, it's very difficult reading.
Yeah, some people can soak up everything. Now, with numbers, I'm pretty good at numbers. But anyway, I called Brian. I said, Brian, flat left wrist is not even happening. He says, no way. I said, well, come over here and I'll hook you up. I said, if you can go in the flexion going through, he says, I could go in the flexion going through impact. I said, full speed. I said, I'll kiss your butt and give you a week to call a crowd. So we hooked him up, and he started hitting balls. And now his wrist was much better conditioned than mine, but he was still moving towards extension. That's 2006. That's why Brian also knew the right answer when this started coming up in the internet, in the late single-digit internet world, that the lead wrist was going in. We were still fighting about the lead wrist going towards extension 3 years ago. Pretty much has died, finally. But that doesn't mean we want to be in extension when we hit a golf ball. It's a difference. Now, if we have a strong grip, we could be in extension. But if you have a weak grip, if you're in extension,
you're in trouble.
It's not good days. So anyway, you learn this stuff. But then I realized that just because I knew more doesn't mean I could get people to do it immediately. So I had to figure out ways in which to do it. And I've always been a big exaggerator of what I ask people to do. And one of my students said it perfectly. He says, you want me to do this in a cartoonish fashion? And so I use it ever since, cartoonish. Yeah, I want you to look like a goofy, cartoonish guy going this way or that way. Come on, overdo it. And through all of that, we basically have to dance with the girl we brought with who walks in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Us as teachers think that, and we do have a great wealth of knowledge, but we really got to go make this donkey a better donkey. I'm a donkey. I'll never be nothing but a donkey. I just want to be the best donkey I can be. So we want to tune up the donkey, the quarter horse, the thoroughbred, the secretariat. That's all we're really there to do. Because most people, unless you win the lottery and they win the lottery at the same time, it's tough to totally rebuild a swing. When you start with a young kid and they're in your junior clinic and you see them twice a week, you can start from scratch. But when you got a 50-year-old guy who works 70 hours a week, who plays golf once a month, who's not verifying, who don't take a lot of lessons, good luck. But you can trick them into being a better golfer. You can find ways and get them to do things and have better concepts to make them geometrically better. So golf is a speed generation system and an impact alignment system. So that's what I learned through the 3D, was that how do we create speed for this golfer? and then still deliver the club in a lawful manner. We have to do both. We can't just do one. Now, we could be working on one while the other goes haywire and vice versa. But most people have enough speed to play the golf of their dreams. I try to increase people's speed, don't get me wrong. But most people, with their good shot, they got a smile on their face. Let's just give them more good shots. That's what we really should be doing. And then increase their speed if we can. I don't discount that. So with that, I mean, I take all the technology. I have, I think they could almost see that. That's a spreadsheet on one golf swing. So this is a spreadsheet that has all the gears information on all P10 positions of what all these positions are with my database of really high-end players, tour players down to mini tour players, and then whoever I'm actually giving the lesson to. 500 entries into that spreadsheet, not done automatic. 500. It's got the force plate data, same thing, 7-iron swing data and driver. And I've got the tour player database, and then I've got basically what I've considered their standard deviations. And then I take what you do and put it in there, and then it pluses and minuses in the Excel spreadsheet, gives you a different color based on where you are.
How do you?
From AMM. AMM did that in a different way years ago, so I thought that was genius.
How do you differentiate you in a lesson that you're giving to somebody if they're which of the things that they're deficient in, given all those measurements that you're able to do? One is how do you determine which one needs the most attention? And then how do you determine if some of the things that need attention, maybe that person's unable to do for a variety of reasons, physical, incapably, or they're incapable of doing it physically, or if you mess with it, you could send their swing off in a direction that's down a very dark path that is very hard for you and for them to recover from. So how do you go about that?
All of the above. To me, that's the experience of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know what scratched the itch, and you got to know what scratched the itch first, second, third, fourth, and you got to know the student in front of you, how much pain they're willing to endure to change. So you have to read that student, and sometimes it's the first time. How can you read somebody the first time? Well, I'm no different than the guy who found this thing in my stomach. I got no choice but to tell them the truth. You start with the truth. You got these things to fix. This is how I see your swing moving and going. How much pain are you willing to endure? Hey, I just want to win the Venmo game. We got our members here at Tchefuncta, they have a belt called the Venmo belt. They got a big belt buckle on it. It's a Venmo belt. So anyway, I just want to win the Venmo belt. They don't take lessons. They just getting their butt kicked. So they're shanking it and whatever. So you might call that Band-Aid. I don't call that Band-Aid teaching. You don't have to take everybody apart. See, us just being drawn to teaching, we're complex individuals, most of us. And so we see that person taken apart, put back together in this super person that they could be. It's hard not to look at a golfer that way. This is what I see this person could become. But guess what? They're not all willing to go from here to here. Chuck Cook had a great story. He says, guys, I'm a 10 handicap skier, he said. But I don't take lessons. I don't care if I get any better. I'm happy to be a 10 handicap skier. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool story, right? Not everybody's trying to get here. So you don't want to take everybody apart if they're not willing to go here. Everybody says they want to go here, but you have to eventually stop and go, you really don't want to go here. You want to hit that ball perfect in 3 swings, and now you're slamming the club on the ground after 5. You got to have the balls as a teacher to interject right then and there what you see.
Yeah, and part of why I bring that up is I've heard it more than once. Mike Adams tell the story when Kuchar, they put him, I think it was on the force plates or something that he had to measure the sequencing, that Kuchar got, I might get this wrong, let's say 15 yards longer on his driver when he did it correctly off what the data was saying, but Kuchar's like, there's no way I can change that. Look at the success I've had. How does it? you take a tour pro at that level. I mean, now you're dealing with the psyche, and that's a very, very delicate balance, as you're very well aware of. And it's just like, what do you play with? Because, I mean, for anyone working with tour pros or that wants to work with tour pros, you can screw somebody's livelihood up very quickly if you make the wrong change or recommend a change. Your weekend golfer, do they notice a difference? They're shooting 100. They're probably going to shoot 100 anyway, unless they're going to spend a little more time on what you're telling them. So it's not as bad. But that's kind of where I got that question from, is how do you know, even with the mountains of data that you more than anybody or as much as anybody are able to gather, that's still a very interesting. I'm always curious how other coaches pick what to address.
I think that's what. Look, that's where I've got my way, and I haven't, and I've seen different people, and Mike Adams does is, he basically measures in what he thinks people can do,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's great. I mean, if Tommy Moore, a dear friend of mine who passed away, was All-American. He didn't have much right wrist extension. He couldn't bend his right wrist this way, so he was limited as far as he could bend it. So. Therefore, he never lagged the club a lot. All-American at Oklahoma State, by the way, but didn't play on the tour. He was one of the shortest players on the tour. Corey Pavin was longer than he was. Dear friend, unbelievable man. So everybody has limitations. Some people can rotate fast, other people can't. You could put a gun to my head, and I can't rotate fast. Okay? So knowing what to do don't mean you can do it. So you have to decide. But then again, I've had people, when I tell them to rotate, give them some drills, have them work on some things, they rotate better. So me, you don't know me, but I'm 50 pounds lighter than I was a year and a half ago. I haven't played almost any golf in the past 20 years. Been so enthralled in my, being a head pro, trying to do the best job I can, and trying to be a world-class teacher in a world-class building. And loving every minute of it. So my game was last. I got a bigger thrill out of helping somebody than I ever did hitting good golf shots myself.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so now here I am. First thing I did last March, my first month not being a head pro, I measured myself in gears. It's 272 pounds, and I moved X. No turning, mofo, flip, recock, okay? I mean, I get sick to my stomach even thinking about it. Now, when I was 20, I could move better. But now I'm 64 next month. Can't move, and I got run over by an 18-wheeler in 05, which is another reason I don't kind of play golf. Because it's no fun shooting over 80 when you were used to being much better.
Mm-hmm.
That's no fun. So, anyway, but I want to play better. I want to get back to what I fell in love with in the first place. And here I'm a year later and teaching. I haven't played around in golf yet. But anyway, I did that, and then I'm going to, I've done it about 2 months ago, and I'm moving better, and I'm doing certain workouts, and I'm getting better at it, and I'm finally looking at my golf swing. Believe it or not, my AMM, I only hooked myself up once. My gears, I hooked myself up in 14 when I got it, and maybe only 2 other times full body in the 9 years I've had it. So I'm the last person. I'm the plumber with the leaky faucet. So, but then again, I have that passion, but I keep getting pulled to these other things that I'm doing that I have more fun doing.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do with a student in front of you is you have a certain, after a while, you create your own progressions. By the way, the sheet I have for the golfers called progressions. And you got to decide which ones you put first. For instance, guy comes in with a weak grip, rolls the face open, left wrist bent at the top, see the back of the club coming down, hits a cut across slice. Grip first. Manage the club face. Teach them that it's okay to twist it. By the way, I was teaching golfers to twist the grip a long time ago, and every time I went to a seminar where a high-level teacher says, don't tell people to twist the grip. And people are respected. And I'm going, well, I'm sure not going to tell them I'm telling people to do that. But I got a full book. I felt like I'm doing it the wrong way. I'm telling people stuff I shouldn't tell them, when I really was telling them exactly what I should have been telling them. Now golf's come back to that. So you go find for a slicer. You go find the reason they slice it, which is an open face to path. And even a square club face for a slicer is a slice because they're swinging left. You say, well, go fix the path. I'm basically a face first slice fixer. Go fix the face first and then the path. And for hookers and good players, I'll go fix the path first and then the face in general. Okay. And then you got to consider low point in there too. So you've got my hierarchy is this: golfer never played in their life. First, full motion, full speed motion to a complete finish. Number one. None of this half stuff. I want them to challenge their body to go all the way through. Well, for a 16-year-old kid, I don't have to do that. But I got Mr. Haverkamp in front of me. I want to see how much he can move. I'm going to open his left foot up. I'm going to get his butt to his finish position all the way back to George Newsom. I'm going to get them to their finish and get them to hold it. I'm going to get them to grip it right. I'm going to get them to stand right with their posture and grip and distance from the ball and ball position, and I'm going to get them to finish right. Best I can. Beginner. Then I have way less to fix. If they start right and finish right, that means they do more right than if they start wrong and don't know where to finish. So, and then from there, then I kind of prioritize arm structure, creating the right arm structure. In other words, pivot first, arm structure second, wrist conditions third, low point control, which gets into pressure shift in geometry, moving off the ball, not moving off the ball, whatever we're going to do. Then I go fix the path, face, and impact. So in a way, that's what's in my head. That's my little map. It's on the wall. So therefore, so if I go grip, check, posture, check, full position, check, in other words, finish position, check, pivot up, this is where the pivot's back. So I'll go fix the pivot. And then I give them enough arm swing stuff and wrist conditions for them to hit enough shots during that lesson to give them hope. If you don't give people hope within a given lesson, they're lost. Nobody gives you a pill except chemotherapy where you feel worse after you take the pill. So people are not conditioned to be worse, but you're going to have to deal with some of that. So the way I deal with it, I live in New Orleans. Outside of New Orleans is the murder capital of the world, just about 3 times the murder rate as Chicago. And so I tell people, I'm doing this in New Orleans crime terms. You stand in the middle of your house, somebody's breaking in the front door, the back door, and the 2 side windows. You try to get the guy out the back door, you got to be okay with the other 3 people stealing your stuff. And when you're concentrating on the guy in the side window, you got to be okay with the other 3 people stealing your stuff. So when you're concentrating on this, I'm only going to evaluate on this. I know that's going to go away. I know we just worked on posture and now it's not good. I know we worked on release and now you're thinking of whatever. But it's okay. See, it gives them more patience with themselves and us if we let them know that we're only going to do one thing at a time, and then we're going to work on this, and then we're going to work on this, and so forth. And we're only going to think of that and let it come together as a group. That it's okay to, number one, I don't like my students to hit a lot of golf balls while they're doing it unless they're at an advanced stage and they've got like 1 or 2 things left. Other than that, we only hit a golf ball after I tell people what I want them to change for one reason. I want to see how much they revert with new information. No other reason. If they go hit balls trying to change something, they're burning calories unless they're actually validating what they're doing. So in a way, that's kind of my process.
As a coach, I knew that, but I never understood it. And what I mean by that is what stopped me from playing competitive was back issues, some very bad degenerative back issues. And I didn't play, very rarely played for almost a decade. Didn't touch a club for 2.5 years. But when I started, of course, you have the itch, and you always want to do something, especially when you were a player and then you're a coach. You can't just not do anything.
You were a real player. I was never a real player.
Well, not that. And if I was so good, I'd be.
Anybody that played golf for a living, even at the mini tour level, it's a golfer.
But where I learned it was as I was getting reintroduced to all the coaching, and I, jumped back in when all this tech was taking off. I would kind of piece things together, but I have a kids club, a metal kids club that's probably 2.5 feet long max, right? Or not even maybe that. It might be 24, 26 inches. But I would sit there and swing slow motion in my dining room. And I would only swing to positions. And so I did this for the better part of a year. And I'm not saying I would segment an hour. I would do it when I get up from watching some TV program in the evening, when I go to the kitchen and get something to drink. I put the drink down. I'd maybe make 10, 15 swings. Or if I get bored, when I used to watch the news, I'd get bored watching. I'd go over, grab the club. I'd make, okay, here's where you need to get to. Can you get there? Okay, you put yourself there enough. Now let's say you move to get there. So I slowly and progressively worked on things that I did incorrectly before, or fixed them. And then when I did, I have a bunch of buddies that come to town, and I had not played or hit a ball. And when they came, I said, well, I'll play with you guys, because we all grew up together. And I went out and I played, and I think I broke 80, and I thought I'd be lucky if I was going to break 100 for not touching a club for so long. But just doing those swings to get things correctly, to build from scratch, is what I call shadow swings. I don't know why I came up with that term, but to do something correctly without hitting a ball. I'm going to change this, and this is what it's going to be. And then when I went and did hit a ball, it seemed to be relatively in that general area without digressing back to old patterns or falling back into what I did many years prior. So it's like the board got erased. And even if what I put up on the board wasn't 100% correct and hadn't done it enough, I didn't get, as Tiger calls it, as reps. I had done it enough in slow motion or repetitively enough that I could do it somewhat decently when I actually went out and did play. And that's the foundation for my resurgence. It's not a resurgence, but my getting back to playing, or at least have the desire to play some senior stuff, if not at the bigger level, at least in the Carolinas.
No, that's cool. And there was a guy named Paul Bertheley.
Bertheley, yeah. He did some seminars at Ferris State when I was there.
Okay, so Paul Bertheley, who I never met, I never read anything. I just knew, I think he lived in Baton Rouge, was a position, talked to positions. And, I think positions are helpful in many ways, but eventually you have to go recruit your body to put you in those.
Yes.
So this is a big thing. So the reason a golfer can't change something immediately is they've got this recruitment pattern to make this club go fast. And the problem is that self-recruitment creates a bad geometry of delivery of the club in most cases. So I call the golf swing a jackknife, a controlled jackknife with geometric consequences. So we are swinging this body and moving to make this club go fast, and we're recruiting each our own way. My femur's longer than yours, or shorter, or my wrists are stronger or weaker, or grip is inside. And it's just, I tell people the golf swing is like taking a pile of chain, and welding one to a post, one end, and throwing it. And it comes out, pop, 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 pop. And what's at the end is what hits the ball. That's what we're dealing with. All this mess between the ground and the golf ball. Up the cycle, the circle. The ground and the ball. The ground and the ball are the only two things we can take for granted. Everything else moves.
Yeah, those are fixed.
And what that club has to do with that ball is undeniable. There's nobody denying gear effect. There's nobody denying face-to-path relationship. There's nobody denying speed, ball speed, launch angle, spin rate, spin axis tilt. Nobody doubting that. So what we do, we have to go find out how that club's delivered to that ball and then work backwards to the ground if we're going to go fix the whole system. So if you've got a swimming pool, real expensive swimming pool, and the guy says you got a leak on one of the sides, and this guy comes and brings this big-ass backhoe into your backyard, and if he nicks the sidewall of that pool, it's caving in. He better have those wheels on solid ground, because that bucket is only as good as what he's sitting on top of.
Mm-hmm.
It can only do so much precision work based on the component nearest to the next fixed point. That's just how I think. Now, that doesn't mean I work on a guy 20 lessons on his lower body to get this perfect pivot. Sometimes I have to have him go find it with his crappy pivot because he can't change his pivot. Maybe he's got a replaced hip. Maybe he's got a bad knee. By the way, going back to that Greg Rose thing, the deceleration stuff, that's how I finally learned how speed was generated, through acceleration and deceleration from proximal to distal skills of segments. And that then I measured, I had Jeff Flagler, who was the long drive champion of the world 9 years ago. He was at my place. I put him on gears. I asked him like 7 or 8 questions. He didn't get one of them right. So here's the guy who hit the ball further than anybody on the planet, but he didn't know why. And that's okay, because he's still the longest. Good guy, by the way. So in other words, he didn't know it, but his rotational speeds were no faster than a fast end tour player. His decelerations were faster. He stopped faster. That's why he hit it further and in a correct order.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got all kinds of circus sideshow freaks on gears and force plate. We can go in for hours on that. So, it's fun. So the speed generation system and the impact alignment system, that's what we are as human beings. 1 foot putt, we can have little chest rotation, no independent motion of the wrist and hands. And that works. You can't hit a 50-yarder doing that. You know what I mean? 60-degree club, you can't go fast enough. So you have to have some system of creating inline and out of line and accelerating and decelerating components in the golf swing to create speed. And then, the guy who goes back, who has the shoulders and the hips together, we've all seen the type who never has, the Hulk, the strong guy. And then you got some young kids going, his pelvis is getting out ahead. And again, this is all part of it. And then when you're looking at the ground reaction forces, I worked a lot with Sean Foley in the early teens, and when he was working with Tiger, wonderful friend. And of course, when I was working with him at Core Golf Academy, I was working as a head pro here, but I would go once a month to Core for a couple of days, and it was great time, because he's teaching Tiger, and everybody and their mother wanted to be around Sean Foley, and I happened to be there. And he wanted to learn a lot about what I learned about TrackMan and so forth, and that's how we became friends, which is a whole nother story. But then he didn't realize that I had my knowledge on 3D. And so we're sitting there one day, and people from all over the world, every time I went there were teachers from all over the world watching us teach. And so, what's his name from Body Track? The original brain cramp. He walks up with the first Body Track. It looked like a black plastic bag with a wire hanging out of it. And of course, Sean Foley's teaching Tiger. He goes, "Here's one free. Here's one, James. You have one too." Well, I never had anything with that. I said, "Well, great." So I bring it back, and it's 30 hertz, 30 frames a second, and then the actual video that you would have wouldn't tie into the graphs or anything. So it was very difficult to use, but it was way better than nothing. Way better than nothing. But I bet you only worked on that thing 5 hours before I just quit using it. And because I realized there's a better way. I'd seen dual force plates in 1994 with Hank Johnson. I saw dual force plates. Didn't know how to read anything. But I'm going like, I want 2 separate plates, because I know that's the way they do it in the scientific world. So I never bought the Catalyst people are great people. I never bought any of their stuff. I said, I want dual force plates. I went to them, one of the first people, 10 years ago, and said, y'all need dual force plates. They said, well, we know that, but we're many ways away. I said, how much would it cost if I get dual force plates, if I go buy some Kisslers or whatever, that you could write the software? And they came back and said, well, $35,000. I said, I'll do it. Then they came back to me the next day. They go, well, we can't do it for $35,000. I said, well, what do you need? He says, if you get 5 people to do it, we'll do it. So I went and found Mike Adams and 4 other people. And I said, here's 5 people. Well, they came back about a week or 2 later and said, we really can't do it. So I was in a search, and I never bought anything. I said, why do I want to learn on something that I know that's not really 100% right? So in 2017, Gas was the first ones to come up with plates that were actually available for purchase, dual plates. And I had met with Steve Gold, who's a wonderful guy. And we almost had an agreement where I was going to buy the plates and I was going to do some education for him. The only reason I didn't buy them wasn't because of Steve or his product, because it's excellent, was because Smart to Move came on board and they had an exclusive with TrackMan. Of course, my relationship with TrackMan was strong, so I went with them. And when I got them in, first person in the United States to have the Kisslers with golf, hitting indoor, outdoor, I didn't know how to turn them on, much less read a graph. But I knew I wanted to learn the right thing.
Yeah, you had that basic fundamental. You had the desire, the commitment to it, and then you had obviously, you had obviously gone down the road as we discussed earlier with cameras and everything, video and everything else. You weren't afraid to know what you didn't know at that point.
Because I knew eventually I was going to stand in front of people and tell them what I learned.
Yeah.
And if for a guy, unless the guy put in the same number of hours or work for somebody a lot smarter than me, there are a lot of people smarter than me, but nobody's going to outwork me. And so I just learned to try to do it on my own for the most part. But then again, eventually, as I told my buddy at my buddy's funeral 25 years ago, crack addicts eventually find each other under the overpass. Well, passionate golf teachers eventually find each other under the overpass, which basically means they love it so much they'll do anything to learn and get better. And eventually we've all found each other happy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes this so much fun, because we're all learning and trying to get better at what we do. You don't see me learn something today and post it on the internet tomorrow. If I'd have started posting in 2005 and 6 and 7, no telling what my world would be like today. But I don't regret it.
Let me ask you.
Every day I learned something I didn't know the day before.
One question I want to ask you is, you obviously had you were doing things well in advance of the masses, and you had noted that at one of the seminars that you went to that they said, working I don't know the exact term, rotating the grip or twisting the grip. So you were developing ideas and theories that we now take today as the norm, but back then I would have to assume that many of them weren't, but you had that information to go to prove it. How did you go? How did you?
I wasn't the only one. Look, I wasn't the only one. There were people all over the country teach people to twist the grip. There was a guy named Jimmy Self in City Park that Brian and I knew. He was the most successful teacher back in the 70s because he could get a slicer to not slice it. Now, I never saw him give a lesson, but I only found out later, that's what Jimmy Self told me. Well, a guy never saw a video camera in his life. So there are a lot of people who figured this stuff out.
But what did you do to where you had information that you were 99.9% was correct, and now we know it's 100%, but it went against a lot of the conventional thought process of the coaching and teaching world at the time. Did you stand your ground? Did you say, hey, okay, I'm not going to argue with you? Right.
I was measuring. What did I have to stand my ground on? I tell everybody, you go measure and you're going to find the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was measuring. I'm going back to Mr. Ray Lacombe. Now, I'm not saying I have all the right answers. There's debates, obviously, among the people who are both measuring and have people 100 times smarter than me that don't agree. But in the end, it's about the golfer in front of you putting the club on the ball. And then you got to tell that golfer his best way to do it. I'm not going to teach Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to do a fallback jumper, and I'm not going to teach Dirk Nowitzki to do a hook shot.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. Both of them went through the hoop in the same way. So, and I don't let anything go. People says, like the young kid, little amateur kid that just turned pro, he said he never took a lesson. And God bless him. Matter of fact, one of our assistants in the shop was the head pro at the course Sam Bennett grew up at. And he said he did help. And I'm sure he did help Sam to some ways. But Mike's not a very technical teacher, so I know he didn't teach him anything technically. So he says he never took lessons. So all of a sudden there's this guy that's taking a ton of lessons. He says, I know what I've done wrong. I'm taking a bunch of lessons. This guy didn't take any, and he's great. Boy, that's like saying a person who never went to the doctor until they're 95 is the reason they live to be 95 is because they never went to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. He just happened to never get a disease. And Freddie Couples never got the shanks. And So the thing is, you have to, you need, your golfer in front of you needs to know where they're breaking the rules, the laws. And then we teach them how to change it for them and how to become the most lawful they can be. So I call that globally shifting people. Guy's way over the top and he's falling back on his right foot. And I can get him swinging to the right and get to his lead side. Most guys in this world can, but that doesn't mean he precisely does it. And that doesn't mean he does it repetitively. But you can globally shift them. So the first thing is to globally shift somebody towards where you want. And you do that without a ball. Then you start adding the ball, and the ball goes everywhere. Then you start working more on the arms and the arm and body connection of how they interrelate to each other and what's best for that golfer to help create the right release. So, but when you measure all this stuff, I never forget, this is a cool thing. This is a great meeting. The first year I had TrackMan and 3D. Brian got Michael Jacobs, Michael Finney, Brian, John Hardesty, and I can't remember who else was in the room. They came to my place, and we all got on 3D and gears for a day. TrackMan and gears for a day. And that's where I started showing them some of this stuff. And they were all passionate teachers. It was fun to be part of that group. But I think that's when they all started saying, wait a minute, maybe even some of the stuff on the golfing machine, I got no pleasure in proving anything wrong in the golf machine. In fact, I proved way more right of what I learned than I did wrong. So what Homer figured out on his own was magnificent. If he'd have been born 50 years later, I wouldn't be on this screen. Homer would be. Because he'd have figured it out. I'd have had to beat him out of that room with a baseball bat to get him out of this building. And so he wrote the book 7 times because he kept learning and evolving. And he unfortunately passed before the 7th was printed. So there's always been passion in this stuff. And we're all learning. And we all have our own way. And you sit there and put a swing up on this, and I'll tell you what I'll go after first, second, third, fourth in my mind. And then once I start doing it with somebody, I say, whoa, they picked this up. This guy's now overhooking it. But I need him to spend time on that side of zero. I want you to get on the other side of the equator. And you need to feel what both sides of the equator feel like to feel what the middle is. Mm-hmm. Golf is played by feel. But there's a geometry system that determines your success and failure. So that golfer has to create a feel system. And that's out of the Golf Machine book, by the way. There's a feel system and a geometry system. So again, there's still things to this day I talk about that's out of that book. And so you have to golf and you have to have trust. I worked a lot with Bob Rotel in the early 90s. I was doing the club fitting side of these teaching seminars. He was doing the psychology side and then bringing a high-level teacher and like Jim McLean and people like that. And like a half a dozen of us would work with 25 club pros. And I would listen to all those guys. And then I realized I was measured more than all of them. So all of a sudden it gave me confidence as a full swing teacher. It's like, oh my God, do you know what a Golf Tech swing analyzer is? It's a little black thing that sits on the floor. Came out in the mid-'80s, late 80s, and it'd have a light in the ceiling, and the club would hit the ball, and it would cover these little holes, and it would tell you the path, face, and impact point, and club face rotation. I always said once I met the old guy, all I needed was something to measure the club and the ball. TrackMan wound up doing both, but I was measuring the club, and then I got a vector launch monitor in 01, so now I was measuring the club and the ball, and then I got my 3D before I got TrackMan, so I was measuring the club with Golf Tech, the ball with the vector, and the body with AMM, Titleist. Then I got a TrackMan. So I was working my way through the system with all of this stuff, and I go back and look. And then you realize, what do you take first for that player? Start off with, if they're not in the position to bottom out in front of the ball when the ball's on the ground, they're screwed. Mm-hmm. We had almost every shot off the ground. So one of the main things I look for, if they have lag, their head position can be in a different place than if they don't. So while you're teaching them lag, you can't have their head that far behind the ball with an iron. Can't happen. Before I ever heard of stacking till with people without lag, I either kept them over here or got them over here to where they could hit the ball in the ground. Because if you can't hit the ball in the ground, you can't play the damn game. Every shot's fat or thin or both. Like the bunker shot that's fat and then it actually skulls. Right? So those are very simple things. So a guy with lag, other people with tons of lag, I got their head 5 inches behind the ball. So you've got this unraveling system that has a low point, a path, face control, an impact point. That's what we're managing. That's an emotional being that has to change. That's what we're measuring. I mean, that's what we have to deal with the people in front of us. And so I love measuring because it helps me. For instance, I had a lady in here this week with the 2 force plates now. See, one force plate is if I put you on a table with both feet on the table, I can measure the table twisting, sliding, going up and down, but which foot made the table do it? That's why I never went with a single force plate. Mm-hmm. Which foot's doing what? I'm going to tell you to do something different if I don't know which foot's not doing its job. Hello?
Yeah, you got to know the details of what's going on, or else how do you know what you're going to do?
I didn't know myself. I couldn't read a graph that Swing Catalyst put out before I got my plates. I didn't know what to look for. So when I went, I knew nothing. People thought I knew everything. Hey, man, what do you think about ground reaction force? I go, nothing. I don't know nothing about that. I was 17. They go, you're kidding me. You know about everything. I said, until I get dual plates, I don't even want to learn. And now everybody's starting to get dual plates, and now you're seeing all this stuff come out. It's fun. I had a guy on his knees the first week I had. I said, get on your knees. Ground reaction forces look just the same on the knees as it was standing up. Not as strong, but dude, they were the same. It was crazy. I've done all kinds of stuff. I have done gear stuff. We talk about the center of mass of the club changing the club delivery. And so what I did is I took a super swing thing, made it 200 grams, put the same shaft in a super swing device as in a regular club head, and measured the shaft loading with both in gears to see how much of the shaft loading was from the golfer and how much of the shaft loading was from the club head design.
What did it show?
Pretty cool. Huh?
What was the difference?
Players, but it's not 100% the club. It's the golfer, some of it, most of it. Depends on what you're doing. It's pretty cool. I'd love to show it to you one day. It is fascinating.
Yeah, I've got to get to that area. Brian, as you know, has been on the show. The guys from GOTA, I told you about those training guys. They're in New Orleans area. A lot of you guys are there that have told me I got to get there. So it is a beautiful city. I know they have some issues, as you mentioned, but it's
the best city. It's the greatest city in the world that just unfortunately has a crime problem. It is the greatest city in the world. It's kind of a mere shell of what it used to be, but then again, it's still got some things that are so unique. I've been working on a club fitting program my whole career, but I finally started making a program to where I'm actually able to capture TrackMan data directly wirelessly into my computer, thanks to Frederick. I haven't sold it yet, but I could take TrackMan numbers, and then in the background, I have the 5 major manufacturers, every single offering. Do you know in the top 4 manufacturers have 700 heads and over 2,000 shafts they offer?
Yeah, not surprised.
And it's all in there. So in other words, if you want a low launch shaft in a certain torque and a certain this and a certain that with a manufacturer, we go right to it. So I do that because you realize that 2 people don't deliver the same club the same. They don't torque the club the same. Mm-mm. 2 guys at 100 miles an hour might deliver the club totally different based on how they load the shaft. So, but I knew that. One of the reasons I got off of AMM is because one of the sensors was on the shaft up by the grip. And then when you digitized it, it digitized the head, but it basically programmed it as a straight rod. So it never told you what the face did. It only told you what the grip did, and it assumed that whatever the grip did, the face did. Well, I knew that was wrong then, and I knew I wanted that. Then when gears came along, all of a sudden it could show me the loading and unloading the shaft, how much we twist it, lead deflection, droop, all that stuff changes. And that when you start changing shafts and changing golfers, that they delivered it differently, and that you could go find something that helps that golfer. He might be fighting something that you can change with a shaft.
Yeah,
but you can't cure cancer with shaft changes, okay? But that doesn't mean you can't help somebody.
correct.
In other words, the same thing with spin. Oh, we can put this shaft in there. Impact point changes spin more than anything. Face to path relationship changes spin. Spin loft changes spin. Speed changes spin. So those change spin way more than the shaft will.
That's why
So the shaft makes the difference, but it doesn't make the difference.
16 years ago, when everybody was basing the three big criteria for driver fitting in particular, or in iron fitting to a certain extent, because I had worked for a guy who was exceptional at club fitting. He was the first one that I found that measured, not only did he measure everything else, but he measured what the individual could produce as far as horsepower. And then he had his magic was the ability to match the shaft to that golfer on load value, frequency, length, lot, the entire thing, also based off the head design that they were playing. So hosel depth, heel to toe, center of graft, center. It was unbelievable. And he's retired.
Well, he knows a lot more than me.
I'd love to connect you with him. He's retired now. He's somewhat difficult to get. He's like, I've done that. I did that for 45 years. I'm not doing it anymore.
So the question with that, how did he come up with that?
Yes, because he had a computer program that he developed, and it did 30,000 calculations in a minute based off the data that he entered on you. And then it would spit out a recommendation for the difference of playability factor between steel, table roll graphite, and filament wound graphite. So you knew exactly what to do. Now, you also went through a test sitting session to see if the information was correct, because if your clubs were so off, you were putting in skewed data. So it gave the recommendation, but then you went and test hit clubs without knowing what you were hitting. He did. And then you told him what felt best. And almost every single time, because I worked with him for about 5 years, people would pick the club that the computer had told them that they needed. He wouldn't show them until after. Every club had a...
Well, that's truly amazing. And you know what? I'm never going to doubt anybody that's done anything with passion for 40 years that has a brain stem. So with me, in 1982, when I started, about 1985, you started being able to buy club heads.
Mm-hmm.
So we can now build clubs. Well, I was building 100 sets of clubs a year by the late 80s, 100 sets of irons a year. And I'm a club fitter. So I bought 25 5-iron heads. Demos used to be in 5-irons. Then they became 6-irons, now they're 7-irons, because they realized nobody could hit a 5-iron and very few people could hit a 6-iron. So anyway, I had 25 5-irons in this bag. Now I said, man, I'm going to have it. This shaft, this lie, that lie, this flex, this grip, this, that, blah, blah. Man, I bring it out to the tee and I'm going to fit them. And I realized I hit all of them equally shitty. And I'm going, it's way more the swing, dude. So but once you get the swing where it is, that's a thing that's going through a cycle. It's loaded and then it's trying to recover, and it goes beyond recovery. That's called lead deflection.
Mm-hmm.
And so it only has one recovery cycle. It's not going like this the whole way down. Okay. And it's transferred from one direction to the other. So a closed face guy at the top, he's got lag deflection. And then when it slows down, he goes into lead deflection. And then a toe down guy is in toe up droop that rotates, that's transferred into lag deflection that winds up in the lead deflection.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things depend on that golfer, how they load and unload the shaft, how it presents the club. So you can change the club head, the ball, the golfer's move where he puts it in his stance, something in his swing, or the club to some place that helps him better do that. So, but the other thing is, one thing I want to say, because on the club fitting side, the golfer's more varying than the one variable you're trying to isolate. So in other words, I want to catch a spin. Let me change this and we'll check your spin. Oh, that was less. Well, maybe the impact point moved that far.
Yeah.
Maybe he drew that one and he cut the, whatever it may be. Maybe he hit a groove thin. And we go, oh, that's it. Oh, it's the shaft or whatever. I'm going, no. Now, if we're hitting on a robot, even a robot, do you know that even a robot was really not any better than Justin Rose in standard deviation?
That I didn't, but I can believe it, knowing what I know about.
Ask anybody who does a lot of work with robots. They're not no standard deviation robots. Because number one, they don't really load it like a human being.
Mm-hmm. There's a pause at the top.
Because in the end, it's a fight between the club head and the ball. You remember the Medicus and the hinge in it?
Yep.
It hit ball just like a regular ball. It's going pa-tink. I mean, it's a free swinging hinge. It doesn't care if you even attach to the end of that damn thing. We could throw the club head at the ball. You ever see them build golf clubs? They put the club head on a little pedestal and they shoot the ball at the club head and it goes flying and the club head falls in a little bag. Then they set it back up there again and do it again. They don't even have a golfer sometimes. The point I'm trying to make, whether the basketball is hit at the floor or the floor hits the basketball, the reaction's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to think about golf in that way, that we're just hanging on the end of it with a club, a shaft, a grip, and shoes and glove and whatever it may be. And how do we change our gumbo, as we say in Louisiana? How do we change that person's gumbo to deliver the club either, faster or more lawfully or both? How do we change his gumbo? What do we have to do? What's the least invasive way to do that without tearing Humpty Dumpty apart, which we all want to do? We all want to build Frankenstein. But, now for a person all in who's playing golf for a living, that's a little different. Then it's more of managing their tendencies and their weaknesses. And boy, you just hope to find a big weakness in somebody that's trying to play for a living. That's like gold. It makes you look smart. Because when a guy, and it happened early TrackMan years, dude. If I'd have been teaching on TrackMan when I first got TrackMan, it'd have been insane. There were guys out there swinging 6-7 degrees to the right, didn't even know it. Drop kicking 3-woods, and literally changing their career because they couldn't dominate par fives. And so, how many people that I helped, and no telling how many tour players could have been helped in that time. And so it's been fun. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. We're all still learning. There's some people that I truly, totally respect that are working this stuff hard or harder than I am, which is hard to believe. But I'm sure there's some. God bless them for doing what they do. The only thing is I have another slide that says, educate, don't humiliate. We need to educate each other without humiliating each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're not going to, everybody wants to find a cure for cancer on their own. And I'm sure somebody will be eventually breaking the last straw, but he had to be built on a whole bunch of people to even get in the right.
Yeah, there's a lot of pedestals that were created before that person.
There sure is. And so, and I'm again 64. I might live to 94. I might not live next week. And I think about that now. And you can't just download what's in my head into some hard drive and go give it to some 20-something-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I don't have all the right answers either. And I just love learning. If you have any technical questions to ask me, I'll answer anything you have. I mean, I'll do the best I can. Actually, they're not going to have my meeting, I've been told. So you tell me when you want to stop.
We can keep. I could talk to you for hours and hours. I guess one question I have is, and this came up recently. We had a local seminar here. Jason Sutton hosted at Colleton River, and Krista Dunton talked, and she talked a lot about Mike Adams' post system, which is largely based off science as far as the anatomical and physiology aspect, biomechanical aspect. And then John Tattersall, who was on just a couple weeks ago, was talking about there is, in all the data he has shown or has found, that there is a lateral component to the golf swing. And I asked him, well, how do you have a lateral component if you are, let's say, a front post or a center post golfer? So I'm just using these two things as an example for the question. So the question is, as somebody who has dealt with science and measuring and data as much as you have. How do you differentiate between when multiple sciences within the industry seem to have conflicting results or butt up against one another at the present time? Is it something that there needs to be discussions on, or is it that technology hasn't gotten to a point yet that we can measure to make the differentiation on when you should use one and or when you should use the other?
When you should use it is still to be debated, or what to put someone into.
Mm-hmm.
That it happens is child's play to measure. So that's one of the first things I had to learn about the tilts and the turns and the slides and the so forth. If you look at, again, we people cringe when you say model, but if the best players in the world as a group without outliers is doing this, I kind of think you need to be moving towards that. There's usually not somebody working exactly the opposite as the way the best players in the world are. Now, the second thing is not everybody does it the same.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is with this, and again, I admire everybody you just talked about a lot. And I find out what I think that person does best. The question is, where's the post? So for a guy who is what they call a front poster, there's a good chance that if a person keeps his lead hip joint in a somewhat central location, in the backswing when he turns, the middle of his pelvis will move away from the target line. And if a person's a rear poster and their right hip doesn't move back enough, the middle of their pelvis will move towards the target. Now, I'm going to tell you which one of those is more advantageous. I can promise you, ain't many great players I see, most early extension happens in the backswing. They're taking the club back, and their right hip is not moving back enough. And so their left hip and their middle of their pelvis is moving towards the ball and never to be recovered.
So when you say back, for the person listening, do you mean back away from the target or back behind them?
Behind them.
Okay.
Okay. So for instance, so here's a mouse. You see the mouse is like our hips.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I put that like this, and I put hopefully I don't click you off. If I put a post in the middle of the mouse, and you see where I'm drawing the line where this is?
Mm-hmm.
If I turn the mouse and don't move the center of that post, the mouse moves away from that line. But the middle of the mouse did not move at all.
Correct.
It turned around itself. So that's where video is screwy. And the same thing with the down the line view. If I've got your rear end here and I turn it, okay, now your rear butt cheek should go behind that line for your middle of your pelvis not to move. So your butt shouldn't stay on the line. If your center of your pelvis is pretty steady, your right butt cheek should go behind the line on the backswing, and your left butt cheek should go behind the line on the downswing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a center pelvis. Now, I don't think for most people, I don't mind a little lateral shift off the ball, less than an inch or so with the pelvis. But that's kind of like rocking a car back in the day. We used to have to push cars to start them. You'd kind of push them, rock back, and then you can really go. Until I got force plates, you had to pull this one over my head. So on the lateral component of force plates, this is my left foot, my lead foot. So I always knew, if you had asked me laterally, what gets you laterally, what's the lateral component in the golf swing? I said, well, it's the trail foot. That you're going to take the club back, and then the trail foot's going to push you to the target. That would have been until 2018, my belief. What I didn't know is that the trail foot was pushing me towards the target the whole freaking swing. And the lead foot, when the club takes back, which, by the way, I call it take back and not address anymore because the swing starts before the club ever moves. The lead foot is pushing you away from the target on most good golfers harder than the trail foot's pushing you towards. Now, I've never done that. They're fighting each other and they're zeroing each other out, but the lead foot's probably winning a little bit. So the true lateral force at take back is usually pushing the golfer trailward.
Mm-hmm.
That force changes for good players before the club is 3 feet from the ball, back from the ball.
Yeah, about 8 o'clock with the shaft position. from what I've seen.
Well, I figured that out day one. So what happens at that time is that the trail foot's still pushing you towards the target, but the lead foot changes teams. He goes from pushing you away to be neutral, and then he starts pulling you towards, now the right foot's pushing you towards the target, and the left foot's pulling you towards the target. And then before impact, they're swapping teams again. The lead foot's pushing you back away. Never would have got that.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. The way you just explained, I did not understand that until a few weeks ago.
Okay.
I didn't understand that dynamic. I could see what is happening, but I could not tell somebody that I was giving a lesson to.
Tell you is feel. If I asked you to now feel it, you could feel it, but you never thought about it that way. I never thought about it that way. So that's what they're doing. So then you've got the laterals. So the max lateral usually is about at transition or slightly after max lateral force. And before impact, some players with driver are max negative lateral force before the club hits the ball. So they go from max forward to max lateral backwards between top and impact.
Mm-hmm.
The rotationals. Maximum rotation, maximum force. Number one, good players have vertical torque, okay? Starting before the club changes directions. Poor players don't. Their lower body's dead, and their arms start down before their lower body creates the torque. It maxes out and reverses before impact. Then the verticals everybody knows about, the squat and the jump. You squat and jump. You squat and right about the top, and you max D-weight at top or slightly thereafter, and max vertical before impact. So all three max and reverse from top to impact. That's what helps undo the jackknife. So the faster they go and the faster they reverse, the more, plus you got muscular within that, of the golfer themselves. I'm talking about how much the club just wants to do on its own fruition. And then you got the golfer themselves putting pressure against the club. So to me, once that club gets into orbit, it's got its own mind to where it wants to go, and then the golfer's pushing all over against it. And before I ever heard of forces and torques, I knew that guys crossed it, usually threw it behind them, and guys that laid it off threw it out here. Mm-hmm. Not all the time. So if I had a guy crossing it and was way under, I'd fix the cross. If I had a guy laid off who was over the top, I'd fix the laid off. But if he was laid off and did it right, I didn't touch it. I didn't go fix it just because it looked bad. We'd have a whole bunch of different people in the Hall of Fame if we'd have done that. Okay? So you go get only what's to your geometric advantage to go get as an instructor. You go get it for a reason. And long before I had forces and torques. So if I put this pen on a table and it's on an angle and I pull it towards me, this is not just going to go this way. It's going to throw the other side. As I keep pulling, it'll fishtail and finally it'll pull straight towards me. That's what the club's doing unless you put a torque on it that keeps that from happening when your hands are fighting each other. So I get a guy crossed, and then I said, well, he's going to throw it under. When it come down, the damn club's as steep as could be, and the club head's outside his hands. Well, I realized his hands were fighting each other to keep what was natural from happening. Way before I ever heard of forces and torques. That was what was happening. Do I know it like they know it? God bless them. They know it 100 times better than I do. But I think I had a practical understanding. I had a thing called Brassman. Matter of fact, here's my model. My first one had plexiglass, and it had shoulders, two arms, and the club built out of metal popsicle sticks, if you can imagine that. So
that'd be pretty
here's
cool.
The shoulders with a pin, and it had two arms that were popsicle stick together, and then the club swinging off of it. And I'd pull it back, and I videoed this, can't find the video, from the mid-'80s, maybe early 90s, and I would let it go. Guess what that club did? By itself, the left arm, the club, at first, it kind of cocked a little more, and then as you started getting down, when the club started getting speed, the club started uncocking, and by the time the club got to the ball, the hands were going backwards. The hands were going backwards.
Hmm.
So when that club kicks out, the clubs, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Now, then when I put a piece of string on the shoulders, the hands, the lead shoulder, the trail shoulder, this is 30-something years ago, and I'd pull on it, then the lag would be there. This is when I was fighting throwaway. This is what got me thinking. Brassman. Anybody who worked for me in the 90s will know Brassman.
One question I'm sure everybody's got in their mind that they're wondering as they listen to this. Have you gotten rid of the throw to this day?
Not totally. Now I got run over by an 18-wheeler in 05, 160, when he hit me and another golf professional, Ron Hickman. And I tell people I walked away, but I didn't walk away. So now my pivot never worked before the way it should. I did get rid of a lot of it before I got into my 40s and got hit by an 18-wheeler. I got rid of a lot of it. But full speed, it's still in there. As I tell people, it's still in there like latent drugs from the 70s. It's still in there. You could get a person in a lesson, and any good instructor could say, you used to be a slicer. Guy hooks 10 balls in a row. How did you know? We know. We can see it's still in there. He just overcame it. Most slicers, when they're young, when they get old as crap, start hooking it. And they don't do anything different. They still got the weak, shitty grip, but they can't pivot fast anymore. So the club passes them up and jackknifes them and flips and closes. And they say, when I swing slower, I don't slice it. Yeah, because we stop the jackknife early and it comes out of its holster early. Mm-hmm. So that's why the mental side is so important in golf, because if you're not committed, you're going to undo this whole chain differently when there's fear, self-doubt. That's why these brain-dead, greedy guys are so good. Trust. It's your best chance. Doesn't guarantee results. And to say that's easy, to do it's hard.
No, it is hard because you
So think about it. If you're wired that way, I worked a lot with Bob Rotella in the early 90s. Like I told you, I was there because I was a club fitter. And I realized, I felt like I could teach with any one of those guys after that. But me and Rotella were like this at first. I said, Bob, if you have shitty geometry, you suck. I don't care if you're a CEO, you're smart, you do everything, you can memorize a book, but you can't play golf because you got bad geometry. And just because you have a belief system doesn't mean you're going to go dominate the world. I said, now, once you have the geometry and the athleticism and the belief system, now we got some magic. You got to have it all.
Yes, because you can watch any tour in the world, meaning the best players on the planet, from DP to PGA, LPGA, champions, live, you pick it. And it doesn't matter what they could have shot 60, and they will always go back to, well, I didn't commit on this shot on this hole, and they missed it. So to your point, and those players, I only use that example because those players, for the overwhelming part, they're the best on the planet at having the geometry correctly. But
yeah, exactly. They have what the good Lord gave them too. They have work ethic, love of the game, whatever it may be. Don't throw up in their shoes when it counts. There's a million things that I'm actually writing another thing. It's called Why Great Golfers Are Great. Mm-hmm. Whether it'll ever be published. It's 25 things I've identified of what makes great players great. But even if they don't commit, they cannot get around the not commitment and the trust to a shot that they're hitting. Well, it's when you go from the hunter to the hunted. Mm-hmm. We've all done it. The last tournament I told you I almost won, I was the hunter until 17. And then I became the hunted. And we've all had that flop on us. You see it happen. And that comes from within. That does not come, what makes a guy start choking down the stretch in a major isn't they come out with this machine that sends this fog out that makes everybody hard to breathe. It's self-induced. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy to get rid of that. But I'm telling you that as soon as you put self-doubt in somebody, that chain undoes itself different. Mm-hmm. Because there's not committed. That's why I think And when I first talked to Bob Rotella about this, he didn't tell me that. I didn't get galvanized on that until many years after I had worked with Bob. But he also, because I said, Bob, he says, well, look, I never took many lessons. He says, matter of fact, I felt like lessons were detrimental. His first book, if you ever read it, it's one of the book 5 I read, him and Laura Bunker, and he was basically almost anti-lessons. Yeah, because most lessons sucked in the 80s and 90s. But he had something, so he was trying to quantify that since he was a good player and didn't really take many and didn't listen, he was good because of his mind. And I just thought it was a step too far. I said, you had natural geometry. You're not bringing in you didn't have to learn your geometry. You didn't start doing this.
Yeah, for whatever reason, he did a number of those things correctly to begin with.
And it was good enough to win the championship of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't good enough to go play golf for a living, but it's a pretty nice accomplished thing, right? So it's really interesting how people get through the sieves of golf to get to where they want to go and which one's prohibiting them from doing it. And a lot of people, it's once you get into that level of self-belief. Because if you don't have a belief system within yourself, and it comes and goes. You know, I was around Tiger enough to hear him talk about certain things, and it's like, you know, obviously never a belief system any stronger than his, and Nicklaus would be 1A. You know, so these guys had belief systems that were off the charts. So that just allowed their geometry that they had work and their athletic ability to be able to come together and create something special.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do it without all those things. And then you got the guys like a Bubba Watson, you know, his caddy, Moose, grew up part-time in Slidell, where I was a head pro for a long time. I taught Teddy since he was 10 and, you know, here and there, and I haven't seen much of him. He's got to have time to spend all his money. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, by the way. He is the best. He's the best. Well, anyway, when he was when Bubba started really hitting, and I said, "You think we can get Bubba in here and I can measure him?" I said, I just want to measure him. I don't want to tell him anything. I want to measure him like a rat and send him home. I'm telling you, it was 10, 12 years ago, easily. And he says, "Nah, I don't think I can do that." I said, "Man, I'd love to have him in here." Because he would light that TrackMan up like a Christmas tree. Because when people say, well, he does it without, Butch teaches without a TrackMan. Sure he does, and that's okay. I think I can read ball flight as good as anybody that ever lived. But you know where I look at a golf swing, where I'm looking? Where do you look when you're giving a lesson? Where are your eyes?
Impact. You try to. And you look
move around different things.
Set up motion. For me, I look at
your first couple of swings. Yeah. Your first couple of swings.
It's bouncing all over. I'm watching the motion.
Yeah. I'm looking at the ball. I'm looking at the ball, and I'm watching the blur. I start with the blur. By the way, I now have this second sense of seeing stuff out of the corner of my eye.
Mm-hmm.
But I start with the blur. What direction's the blur? Where's the low point of the blur? Where's the blur in relation to the ball? What's the sound? What's the ball flight start and the end?
Yeah, I agree. The old timer that I started with said the only thing that matters, kid, is impact. And from that point, I've always looked. When I started teaching, when I got a little older, down at the ball. But
don't think the ball flight can't lie. It's a lying mofo. Because going back to that Golf Tech swing analyzer, had the light hanging from the ceiling, was $3,000. And I said, well, I'm not going to buy one. I didn't have a driving range, by the way. I didn't have a driving range for 15 years of my career. And I did all this. Did it without a range. I had to go pick up every ball of every lesson I ever gave. That's incentive to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So anyway, I said, well, I'm going to set it up on the tee. And I set it up on the tee at Pinewood. Had to bring out a ladder and a light and an extension cord. And my buddy Tommy Moore, bless his heart, he hit the balls. He was, at the time, a mini tour player. He was hitting driver. And I wanted to see if the ball did what the face-to-path relationship said it would do. It said draw, fade, whatever. I said, I'm not going to buy it unless it does what it says the ball's doing. First ball right out the deal. Little baby fade. Looked down, the face was closed to the path about a degree or so. Okay, go again. Next ball went straight. Said it should have drawn. Next ball cut a little more. It said should have went straight. I went, okay, one more. I said, this thing ain't work. This thing don't work. He hit one more ball, and he hit it, and I'm looking down at the ball, and I said, and it said the ball should have gone straight, and it cut a little bit. I said, you hit that in the heel. I said, matter of fact, let me go inside. You know, there was spray out 30 years ago. It sprayed. It was so expensive, like $8 a can.
Mm-hmm.
So it went away. Anyway, I sprayed the face. He hit every ball a quarter to 3/8 an inch in the heel, every single ball. So every single ball was changing the face-to-path relationship, that the ball went more right than the face-to-path relationship said it should go. So that's why when you're looking at a golfer, I tell golfers, your impact point. By the way, I could tell you within 2 minutes if somebody definitely is not going to be a tour player. Can't tell you who's going to be, but I can tell you who's not. Number one, he has to have enough speed to produce to play in the league he's going to play in or she.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they can't have a roaming impact point. If their impact point's roaming, notice I didn't say a good impact point. I said roaming.
Can't be hitting it all over the face.
Tommy Moore's was in the same place every time. And I've been around enough tour players to see some high toers and some mid heelers, ever so slightly, and they do it every time. So it's having the same effect on the face-to-path relationship. But people who are roaming are dogs chasing cars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, Larry Rinker?
Yes.
Good friend of mine, was on the tour for many, many years. We become really, really good friends. And I was doing his podcast, and I went speed, path, face, and impact point. And he goes, James, we never talked about impact point when I was on the tour. I said, yeah, I know you didn't. Everybody that did it bad was cold. They weren't in the room. It's one of the biggest things people take it for granted. I had TrackMan numbers sent to me of the number one player in the world. I'm not going to say who it was, 10 or 12 years ago. Because that's when I kind of knew the numbers maybe more than the next guy. I said, where's the impact point? And his teacher, why you need to know that? Okay? Where is it on face? Does it move? He didn't know if it moved. Everybody moves every once in a while. So I got one guy I taught who's now not playing, but he's a good mini tour player. He could hit 6 drives and none of it would be outside the space of a quarter. But if I gave him a swing thought, it would grow. And then when he get comfortable with the swing thought, it would start shrinking. So there's no doubt in my mind that conscious thought does expand it. But people who, here, you can't trust anything. You got water left and you hit it slightly on the toe when you've been hitting it the heel, you're in the water.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's not going to play for a living. Usually. There might be some, you might say, hey, well, a guy could, hit it here and there. But for the most part, I've never seen anybody with a roaming impact point play at a super duper high level. Just my observation.
No, and you can look at most very tour caliber players, even very high level amateurs, even nowadays, to where because I worked with would have been about your Maurice Bembridge. Do you remember him from the UK? Played in the Ryder Cup number of years. He had the course record at Augusta at 64 until Price shot 63, I believe. And then there's been a litany of 63 since. But Maurice had, I worked with him at Longboat Key Club down in Florida when I got out of school. And Maurice had an old set of Mizunos. And on the higher iron, the 3, 4, 5, it was the size of a dime, maybe even smaller. And then, of course, as you got into lower clubs, it's spread out because he's using it in the sand. He's using it more around the greens. Mm-hmm. But his impact spot was so small. And I played at a fairly high level, and I've had friends who have been on tour. I've been to finals at Q School. You see the dots. I mean, to your point, there's not dots all over the face. There's dots the size of a dime on many of those clubs, and maybe a quarter as you get into the wedges because they're opening faces, closing faces.
Full compression on a driver.
Yes.
So this is the thing. I tell college coaches, I said, if you get TrackMan numbers to me, I work with several college coaches, and you get TrackMan numbers to me, and I said, if you could do anything on that player when you observe them, if you can go watch him hit balls, spray the face, if that's so much as roaming, run. Now, it's not the only thing. I mean, there's a million things that make great golfers.
Mm-hmm.
I got people who have pretty good impact points who can't play a lick, but I could give them the rest of the geometry.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's like the key. That's almost like the keystone.
What's that?
The impact point is almost like the keystone. If you don't have that, then even if you get all the other ones and you're missing that, you're not going to play it on elite level. If you have that, you can get all that.
Put a ball on a robot. You can sit there and put a robot and let me move the tee around. I've done it. My buddy used to be the lead engineer at the oven. We did some cool things. I don't know if you ever saw the slides I had with all the impact points on the face. It's 20 years old. Shows how it changes ball speed, launch angle, and spin rate on the driver. Most stolen slides I ever had. Now they're commonplace, but when they came out, I mean, nobody had those. And it's just, I just had that inquisitiveness, how much it changed the ball speed. That's when I had a vector launch monitor, and I wanted to see how much impact point changed all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, again, it all goes back to Tommy Moore in 1988. That was, I think it was 88. And I always knew I wanted something to measure the club. And I knew then, once I put what I considered all the pieces together, speed, path, face, and impact point, I put stuff on the face every lesson for 30 years. Not every swing, but I want to know where it is. Because you got to know, once you look at that ball, you got to know what impact point did to that ball. How much gear effect changed it. And gear effect is in place almost every shot in the history of golf. Has some gear effect in it. The odds of running the center of mass straight through the center of mass of the ball from the center of mass of the head is, you can get in the general place. Great players are close, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing phenomenon. But when that club starts twisting around and starts tilting that spin axis from what it truly should be, face the path, but as long as you keep that in that, I think you can diagnose very well. I believe I could teach a guy to teach if he sat there and watched me, and we went through my whole presentation. That's one of the things I do is teacher training. They come in here and spend a couple of days with me, and I just work on what their technology and what to look for, and really make their world simpler. I make their world simpler. I don't make it more complicated, because they got to realize everything funnels through those four laws. Every change they make with the person, the ball, or the club, or their mind has to filter through that. How does it change speed, path, face, and impact point for that given golfer? And I tell people this: I educate on occurrences, but I only change on patterns. So if I'm giving you a lesson and you hit a ball on the toe and it overdraws, I go, you hit that on the toe. You go, what do you want me to do different? I go, nothing, until I see a pattern. When I see a pattern, then we'll make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think golfers chase variance too much. They change after every swing and they're a dog chasing their tail. Number one, they don't have the right ingredients. Number two, when this don't work, they go to something else and they're never getting it.
Yeah, you don't know what worked, or they don't know what worked. They don't know what doesn't work because they're changing so often.
Putting the blame or the credit in the wrong place is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Blame or credit in the wrong place is bad. And we've all done it.
How much do you think that you have spent on technology? Because you are, yes.
I have $222,000 of equipment in this building now. That's not counting anything that I bought and threw away for, I don't know, I probably spent career-wise $500,000.
What do you tell?
You know how much I probably made teaching in 40 years?
As much?
Maybe 1.5 million. Pure teaching.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you tell some of the young people listening now that they're looking at how much they make and they're looking at how much some of this stuff costs, and they're really struggling to make that jump, that to go ahead and purchase even if it's somewhat of more of an entry level piece of equipment, a hack motion versus a TrackMan or a force plate.
No, absolutely. Like the hack motion,
mm-hmm.
Perfect example. Okay. Great little unit. So I'm going to tell you two stories or two things. Number one, don't look at any technology purchase as a one-time. If you think of the one-time price, it's daunting. But think of how long you're going to have it. So if a guy's going to go buy a Sam Putt Lab for $10,000, he's going to have it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
What's $500? All of a sudden, that ain't too bad, is it? Okay, but if you go $10,000, it's not in my bank account. I get it. That's number one. Number two, great story. Chris Como interviewed to come work for me in 2009 because he knew I was doing TrackMan, and what a wonderful young man.
Mm-hmm.
Not young anymore, he's over 40. Young, wonderful guy. Passion. You know what passion? He has passion.
Yeah,
All these guys.
I've been trying to get him on.
Fighting each other. They all have passion. That's the reason they're fighting.
Three years I've been trying to get a schedule worked out with him. Him and Ted Scott, the two that have been proven the hardest to.
Teddy won't.
Well, it's not. No, he said he would. Both said they would. It's just that their schedules trying to maneuver time. And I know Ted's a very big family guy, and I every once in a while I'll throw something out there, say, hey, just checking to see if in the next 3 weeks you got time.
Just tell Teddy that James Leitz ain't gonna talk to him anymore. He said, so what? No, but anyway, he's a wonderful guy.
He is.
So, all right. So Chris came and we spent 2 days, and he saw TrackMan and TrackMan and AMM at the same time. And he says, I want to learn more on this technology. And of course, he had learned from Mac and everybody else. Passion, very deep. And after 2 days, we sat in my office, and I said, I'm not going to hire you. And he goes, well, why? I said, because your wealth of knowledge is already so good. I said, there's not much more I can teach you that you don't already know. Secondly, you'd be wasting your career collecting green fees in Salina, Louisiana. I said, you need to go back to Dallas, get your TrackMan, and find a good club, and you're going to own Dallas in 2 years. He goes, you think so? I said, I know so. So he goes back to Dallas, calls me back about a month later and says, I don't have money for a TrackMan. I said, you got a car? He goes, yeah. I said, sell it, take a bike to work. I don't care what you do. He laughed. Well, Chris gambled back years back, and he won a little money playing poker, and I think somebody helped him, and he got his TrackMan. And of course, the rest is history. And he won up that. His passion led him to Quan. Quan didn't know this much about golf before he met Chris Como, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I've never met Quan. I think he's a wonderful guy. But all of a sudden, that's where passion and passion meet and come some really
create
cool
some
things,
wonderful
right?
things. Yes,
exactly. So I actually had a big influence on David Orr in putting. I had 2 AMM systems, an 8 sensor and a 12. When I had the 12, I hooked up the 8 with putting with Dr. Neal's software. He had a putt with putting and short game. And I had one for somebody came in over to work on a putting. I put up this. Well, after 3 months, I used it 3 times on the putting. And I realized my passion's not in putting. My passion's in full swing. Who's got the passion? Nobody more than David Orr. Put that shit in the box. Shipped it to David Orr. I said, call Dr. Neal. The software is already loaded. And they made magic. Until this day, David Orr is probably the most technically knowledgeable putting coach in the world as far as how the club moves. Mm-hmm. So it's fun to have been part of a little bit of the influence of those guys. But they had passion in spades long before they met me. They had knowledge in spades long before they met me. And so, it was just fun being a part of that. So, then you get Chris. He went and then they started doing, I promise you, he went to Quan. He goes, if you will do this research, I've never talked to Chris about this. I'll do all the work. I promise you Chris did that. And then they made magic. They changed, they moved some things and got force plates more pushed fast forward because of it. 3D, a lot of people are already doing 3D, but and again, I'm not enough of an expert to say who's right or wrong among the experts. I mean, I never took physics. I'm not going to go tell anybody they're wrong who's to that level or higher. Mm-hmm. I can only tell you practically what I see and observe and measure, at least in my world, and what I believe my belief is. But I'm easily swayed. I'll change on a dime if somebody can make me understand something differently. A lot of people won't do that, especially when it's monetized. Once it's monetized, they're going to dig in until hell's frozen over. And you can't do that.
No, especially in today's world where information is so
you can't do it. No
shared.
Everybody's giving stuff away now. I mean, I should have been like Mac O'Grady when I first got 3D and TrackMan and go, you want it? 3,000. 3,000. You tell anybody else, you're out. I'd have made a fortune. But it wasn't who I was. I was a head pro. Dude, I had to keep working and do what I had to do. And which is one of the reasons I never taught tour players. People say, James, why do you ever teach tour players? I said, I've taught a few through the years, but you can't be a head pro and teach people.
No, that's really.
Randy Smith did it. And I told him when I saw him last year, I said, man, I applaud what you've done. So you must have had much more. I said, you got to realize if the greens mower guy didn't show up, I was mowing greens. I said, I doubt that happened at Royal Oaks. You know what I mean? So, and when I was working with Foley said, James, I give you 3 people in a month. I said, it's not what I want to do. I said, I'm excited just to be here with you or anybody else who's asked my opinion through the years, and many have. That's fun. That's fun to bounce things off of guys when they have questions. I like being that person. It's not that I know more. I just give it my take of what I see. And to be just even a little part of those is fun enough for me. And being respected by my fellow teachers and professionals is more important to me than being on TV.
Well, that would change the dynamic as well, because you really enjoy what you're doing. I mean, anyone that has ever heard you speak or talk to you, or anyone listening to this episode or this show is that they're going to pick that up very quickly. For you to go into a different realm of what you do, in other words, teaching tour pros, now you're going to have to travel more. You're going to have to do other things. And now to me, and this could be a poor analogy, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, it's like someone who's a very, very good amateur in their 20-somethings, and then they decide not to turn professional because the other things that they enjoy in life, be it's they don't want to travel. They'd rather be around their family and friends more often. They don't want to try to become one of the elite in the world at that profession. They would rather enjoy what they're doing and then make their livelihood maybe in something else and continue to play golf for fun. Maybe they compete in amateur level.
Go sell insurance.
Yeah.
I got one guy I work with, Tommy Brennan, who's played in 30 national championships. He lost the mid-am on the last hole once. Wonderful guy. He's my financial guy. He's right now at the senior British amateur.
Mm-hmm.
He's 62. Okay. So he took that other route, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, the thing is, when these kids decide they want to go teach and they want to go on tour fast, go ask any tour teacher and ask them if it's easy. And I could name some names of some guys that went out really, really young because they're in the internet age,
mm-hmm.
and they learned all this stuff on the internet. And now they're spewing out words like they're Chris Como or James Leitz or Brian Manzella or Mike Finney. And they're spitting it out. The tour player, when they're playing bad, will listen to somebody over and over under an overpass. So it's not the best environment to teach in. You're sitting out there, and yes, now you can at least bring TrackMan and a camera. That helps. But then you're watching them play, and there's 20 people deep. And you're over here on a pull that 4-iron on, or you're way better than me. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just appears you have more of the passion for the research and looking at new things and finding new things, and I don't think you would be as happy. Now, this is a complete I don't know you well enough to maybe say this, so you can tell me, no, that's not right. But I think that
No,
you enjoy what you do
that's
so
where
much
my niche is.
that
That's where
you
it is.
going and having
again,
to teach a bunch of tour pros.
and then to have some kid
to
who
where now
fires
you
because he's
know
having
that
a bad day or his
that
wife don't
if
like
you make a
or-
mistake, that it could
can't-
damage their life.
can't
You are
deal
the
with
type
all
of
that.
person who
and half of them don't
wants
want
to
to pay you
do
and they
so
think
well
they're
for
doing
other
you a
people
favor, and
that
then
I think that you would not enjoy it as
their
much as,
start off with
as
to be great
finding
at
new
that level,
things and
you have
testing
to
all
have a
these
sense of
equipment.
selfishness that's off the charts.
Yes.
And you have to have a sense of never being satisfied that's off the charts.
Exactly. Mm-mm.
Scott Hamilton.
I mean, when Sean came on the show, we were talking about that to some extent.
Well, yeah, it's Scott. Matter of fact, I love Scott. I love Scott Hamilton. He's a lot smarter than you'll come across. He's a good guy. And, so no, it's just not what I would have wanted. And not only that, I need to find needles in haystacks. Are you there? Oh. Hello.
Sorry, James, it cut me off. James, hang on one second. Would you do me a favor and just refresh your page? Just hit the circled arrow. It's telling me that James needs browser.
You there?
There we go. I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you. You hear me?
Yep.
I'm sorry. And I got.
Oh, it's not your.
I got about 5 minutes, and I'm actually. This is really cool. I've got
Let's just.
Kelly Gibson who played it. You there?
I remember Kelly. Yeah, and I'll let
Kelly,
you go because I know you got shit to do.
Kelly's yanking on the door as we speak. Kelly's a dear friend of mine, and he had a hip replacement 6 months ago. Well, I put him on gears in 3D and force plates 6 months ago pre-op. Today we're doing his post-op measurement. So I want to see if his forces, how they've changed, and his club delivery and body motions have changed pre-op and post-op. So that's what
cool.
gets my jollies.
That's
cool,
awesome.
Right?
Yes, very cool.
But
I can't thank you enough. I went way over the time that you said.
No, that's okay. It worked out good today, July 4th. Again, happy birthday, Karen. And, I happen to have free time, so it worked out good. And this is an honor to be able to do this, to talk to any other golf professional about what we do. And I appreciate the opportunity. And anytime you want me to come back on, when you got a couple hours to lose, or you have insomnia or whatever, just give me a call.
Yeah, and next time we're going to do the greatest golf story ever told. I wanted to get that in, but we didn't. But that that definitely lives up to its name.
That's the three guys right there. Me, Roger, and Chip. The three amigos, and there's the gum.
That's awesome. So everyone listening, you're going to have to wait until James, we're able to reschedule and have him back on to tell him. We will open with that story.
Well, thanks, Pete. I appreciate the opportunity. You have a great 4th.
You too.
Thank you.